host, sabrinasalvati.
All right. Happy Sunday, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Sabs podcast. I'm your host, Sabrina Salvati. If you're new, I want to let you know that Sabs podcast is a part of Revolutionary Blackout Network. You can catch me there on Thursdays for the JB and Sabby show. And you can catch me here on Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and every other Sunday. And today is that Sunday. Shout out to everyone watching on YouTube, Rockfin, Twitter, and Rumble. And first and foremost, we have to give a special shout out to the dads. That's right. It is Father's Day. I want to give a special shout out to all the dads out there holding it down, fam. Happy Father's Day to all of you. I think that we cannot forget about the dads. And I've been saying this every year, because Mother's Day gets a lot of attention. Would you agree? I mean, when I waited tables, I know that Mother's Day was one of the busiest days of the year. So no one was allowed to take off on Mother's Day. However, when Father's Day would come around, it was not as busy. Like, nobody care about dad. Nobody care about dad. When you see people win prizes on game shows, who do they usually say hi to? Hi, Mom. Or hi, Mom, and hi, Dad. Mom's always first. And I get it. We love the moms, but I also want to say happy Father's Day to the dads, man. We cannot forget about them holding it down. So if you are a dad, I hope you're having a good Father's Day. I hope you get to spend some time with your kids, no matter how big or small they are. They're always your kids. So happy Father's Day to the dudes in the house that have the kids. What's up? All right, guys. Yes, we have quite a bit to discuss today. A great show. At least I think it's going to be a great show. I try to make the Sunday shows not as heavy. One of the stories is particularly heavy, but the other is not so much. So, yeah. Let's go ahead and start out by giving shout outs to people in the chat. What is going on, fam? Hello. Shout out to Huss, who just became a new Sabby member. Let's give Huss a big whoop, whoop. Doing the thing. What's going on, General Mile? Can we get Candace, Brianna, and Sabby all in one stream, please? That would be an interesting discussion. That would be very interesting. Interesting. I don't know if I would be included in that because I'm not a public figure. So I don't think I would be included in that, but that would be an interesting discussion. Shout out to Miguel, says, peace. What's up, Miguel? Greetings, the Night Watch. Brie is an anti-white bigot anyway. What? Night Watch, what is going on? Brie is not anti-white. Let's stop with that. Shout out to Tim. Protect Brie and Kamala can kick rocks with no shoe on. Just picture that. I'm sick of these lying ass politicians as babies are being murdered. And then you got Billy Porter looking like a disco ball mess at the White House. Yeah, I saw some of the images of Billy Porter. It's a mess. And we all know how Kamala is, but there's something else I'm going to show you about Kamala today that I don't think I've ever mentioned on this show before. That's important in reference to the story. Shout out to Lauren, says, free Palestine. Greetings, Hannah, says, I've been waiting all day for this one. What's up? Shout out to Kenman, says, love Sabby. Greetings, Thon, says, yo, what's up, peeps? What's good in the hood? I don't know. What is good, Thon? Let me know. Greetings, Jacqueline, says, hey, everyone. Shout out to Yantra Mandala, sends love. Greetings, Cloudness. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers out there. And well, Sambo Harvey and Kamala Harris and the Dixiecrat shills have started their berating Black Americans, talking about ain't no reparations. I've heard it all. Greetings, Randy. I look forward to every other Sunday, Sabby comrades. Thank you. That's sweet. What's up, Me Want Tacos? I got a feeling that Sabby is going to be mad at Brie. Why you got that feeling, Me Want Tacos? Why you got that feeling? I just want some tacos. I wouldn't say mad. I have things to say, but I wouldn't say mad. Shout out to Rick says, hey, y'all. Greetings, Soul says, all caught up. Thank you, Sabby. Greetings, Volvo says, hey, 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 hey. Shout out to John Joseph says, hey, S, hello. Greetings, Joe says, hi, perfect people. Shout out to CM says, hit like before she arrives, please. Oh, that was early one. Greetings, Nikki World says, hey, everyone. Shout out to Vietnam says, comrades. Greetings, Patience says, shooby dooby doo. Oh, my nose is itching. I don't know about you guys, or those of you that have to deal with allergies, but the other day my car was green. Just covered with pollen. It's everywhere, man. Even on the doorknob, I was like, Shout out to Eric holding it down in the back says, hey there, Sunday peeps. Here we go. Greetings, Rose says, hi, guys. Shout out to Mark who says, finna light this doobie dooby doo. Greetings, Sebastian says, hey, y'all. Shout out to Angelo says, is Jill for real? I think so. Which Jill, if you're talking about Jill Stein, I think so. Shout out to Anthony sends a smile. What's going on? Greetings, Super Seamster says Bakersfield, California in the house. Shout out to Gregory says salute to the chat. Greetings, Kawan says I love. Shout out to Freeze 380 says what's poppin', sis? I'm still trying to figure it out. Tomorrow is Monday. And you guys know I do not like Mondays. Do not like Mondays. Let's go ahead and give a shout out to, I thought I saw a Father's Day one. I was going to shout out. Me One Taco says, I'll give daddies attention all they want. And Sebastian said, happy Father's Day to all the dads and daddies. Yeah, we got to give it up for the dads, man. We can't forget about them. So let's start giving them more love. Okay. More love. But you guys got to tell me in the chat, why is it that a lot of times when you see people on TV and they win like a game show or whatever, whether it's Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune, the first thing they say is, hi, Mom. Why is that? I don't know. Makes you wonder. Anywho, guys, we have quite a bit to discuss today. Let's go ahead and start out by giving a shout out to Sabby patrons. Thank you guys so much for your support. I really do appreciate you because you're keeping the lights on around me. One of them fickled the other day, so I'm gonna have to replace one of these ring lights. If you have any other tips about lighting, let me know. Shout out to everyone who is a Sabby patron. If you're interested in being a patron, I have 5 categories: Ultimate, Sabinators, Sabsters. Don't forget about those Sabbies also holding down the fort. Yes. And of course, members. Thank you guys so much for all of your support. I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I shouted out Marcus on Friday, but I know some people may not have been able to see that one because that was like earlier in the afternoon. So again, shout out to Marcus Coleman for becoming a new Sabby patron. Thank you so much. Marcus in the house. Someone just said it. Jamie said Jesus and Mom. Yes, I want to thank, if you're accepting an award, right? And the Oscar goes to Sabrinasalvati. Thank you so much. You guys don't know how long it took me to get here. I never saw this coming. Hold on. I got a whole list of people to thank. I just want to thank God for giving me the strength to get through this and to make it. And I want to thank my mom. And then they'll go into thanking all the producers and the studio for taking a chance on them and everything. Eric said it's a different emotional connection to mom. I guess I can see that too. Yeah, man. Don't forget about the dads. Okay. All righty. Let's go ahead and show that beautiful thumbnail so you can see what we are discussing tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Quite interesting stories. Again, I try to keep the stories a little bit lighter on Sunday, but we do have one heavy one, so brace yourself. Brace yourself. Tonight, we are discussing Brianna Joy Gray and Candace Owens unite. And I said unite because they're sharing a sense of unity around the censorship issue, getting fired from their jobs for criticizing Israel. So I said, unite. That's a sense of unity, not solidarity. We'll get into that and what that means. We're also going to discuss Mika criticizes young people. So that is Mika from Morning Joe. Apparently, there's a show now called Morning Mika. So we'll get into that. I'm going to tell you what they're saying about young people. We're also going to discuss Kamala Harris spreads Israel lie. This event is happening tomorrow, but the announcement has already been made. So I want to prepare you for that before you hear the lies that are going to come out of Kamala Harris's mouth. And I'm going to tell you why she's making these statements. And last but not least, I don't know if people have heard about this. Dennis Kucinich actually sent me this. Dennis Kucinich attacks defense bill. We're going to talk about that defense bill that just passed in the House and why that bill is very problematic. And I really think that, look, if you have kids, if you have nieces, cousins, brothers, sisters that are a certain age, I think you're going to want to pay attention to this story because it is very concerning. And I had a feeling they were going to try to do this. So let's get started. All right, let's go ahead and dive into the first story here. If you were not paying attention, apparently this must have happened Friday. The House actually just passed a new defense bill, and I want to explain to you why this is problematic other than the large budget, the ridiculous budget for this defense budget. But there's something else, and we're going to bring in this article here, and I want to explain to you why this is happening. House passes defense bill automatically registering men 18 to 26 for the draft. So for those who are not aware, at age 18, men in the United States are supposed to register for the draft, but it wasn't automatic. And now they are trying to make this an automatic thing. So it's interesting. We can't automatically be registered to vote, but you can automatically be drafted. Let's get into this article here. We're going to pull this up, and we have a couple other things to dive into the story as well. The House of Representatives passed a measure on Friday automatically registering men age 18 to 26 for selective service. It was part of the annual National Defense Authorization Act, which sets out the U.S. government's military and national security priorities over the next fiscal year. This year's NDAA authorizes $895.2 billion in military spending and $9 billion increase from fiscal 2024. So once again, the defense budget has increased. Again, I told you guys multiple times, never in my lifetime. It has never been this high in my lifetime. I'll have to find that chart sometime to show you again how it has increased over the years. But this is the first time I've seen it this high. And this money can be used in other ways in our country that will actually help out the people. But again, this is all about profit for the military industrial complex, and there is profit for the MIC with war. Let's go into a little bit further here. While it hasn't been invoked in over half a century, it's mandatory for all male U.S. citizens to register for selective service, also known as the military draft, when they turn 18. Failure to register is classified as a felony and comes with a host of legal challenges. Supporters of the amendment argue that it would cut down on bureaucratic red tape and help U.S. citizens avoid unnecessary legal issues, as well as cutting down on the taxpayer dollars, look how they do this, going towards prosecuting those cases. So again, if they can cut down red tape when it comes to the draft, they can also cut down red tape when it comes to voting, right? So people, I think in this country, American citizens should automatically be registered to vote. It's up to you if you want to vote, but I think that should be automatic. Let's go on. Look who led this bill. It was led by Representative Chrissy Houlihan. She's a Democrat, and passed in the House Armed Services Committee version of the NDAA in May. The NDAA advanced through the committee in an overwhelming 57-1 vote. And this is Chrissy here. So this is why I continue to say, when it comes to the military industrial complex, this is not just something that's unique to the Republican Party. It's unique to both parties. Both parties support war and the military industrial complex. This bill was pushed by a Democrat politician. The Democrats are just as much warmongers as the Republicans. Let's continue a little bit more on here. By using available federal databases, the Selective Service Agency will be able to register all individuals required and thus ensure that any future military draft is fair and equitable. Let's talk about fair and equitable. I think we all know any type of draft is not going to be fair and equitable. Let's think about who will be drafted first, and let's think about who will be able to get out of it. Rich people, we're talking about 18-year-olds that come from wealthy families, will find a way to get out of it. They'll find a way, whether it's moving to another country for that year, whether it's signing up or, attending college or whatever. They will have the money and the means to find a way not to be drafted. Imagine if you're the son of a senator, a wealthy senator, and he does not want his son to go fight in these wars, even though he's voting for these bills. Because of who your daddy is, you may be able to get out of it. Let's talk about who probably is not going to get out of it and who will most likely probably be drafted first. I think you all know this. They're more likely to come after and draft Black males age 18 to 26. This is not uniquely different from things that have been done before. Poor males from 18 to 26. Working class males from 18 to 26. Those are the people that they're going to send to go fight their wars. Why are they doing this now? With the war with Russia and Ukraine, and there seems to be no end in sight with that, at least this year. Then you also have Israel's assault on Gaza. There's also that. Under Joe Biden, war has increased. The problem is that a lot of younger people are not signing up for selective service. Military recruitment has decreased over the years. In fact, they covered this last year on multiple news outlets because they were concerned that younger people were choosing not to sign up for the military. And why would they want to sign up for the military? The younger generation is more aware of what's happening abroad. They're more aware of countries that the U.S. has devastated through war and through imperialism. So yes, they are less likely to try to join the military. Now, I want to get into the recruitment here in just a second, because I want you to see this part about the pay raise. The NDAA also included the largest ever military pay raise in history, with a 19.5 increase for junior enlisted troops and a 4.5 increase for others. It also included funding for 2 new Virginia-class submarines and the establishment of a drone force within the U.S. Army, among other provisions. And you can see there's a picture there of Mike Johnson. The NDAA passed the House in a 217 to 199 vote, but it's unlikely to be taken up in the Senate. Now, listen to this. Senator Chuck Schumer blasted the bill on Friday afternoon over the inclusion of amendments curbing funding for abortion, transgender medical care, and diversity efforts. So this bill also includes other issues as well. It's not just about defense. You know how they lump these subjects together under one bill, right? That's on purpose. I've told you guys this before. But it seems like it's not likely to pass in the Senate. At least that's what it looks like right now. We'll have to wait and see. Now, there was a gentleman here on TikTok. I want you to hear what he had to say about this, because again, at the end of the day, they want to send your kids, your brothers, your sons, your nephews, your cousins to go fight their wars, their proxy wars. Listen to this gentleman. He breaks this down very well.
You could possibly be automatically drafted now. You remember when you had to sign up for the draft? Well, not any longer. The House of Representatives, you know, the people that give hundreds of billions of dollars of our taxpayer money to fight wars around the world? Well, now they're automatically registering you. As soon as you turn 18, you, men, for the draft. When did the draft start? 1975. You know, when most of the House of Representatives who voted on this graduated college. Well, they're now voting for you to automatically get ready for a draft. Why? Do they want us to fight against Russia and China? Is it because we've been pouring hundreds of billions of dollars into wars and not into the United States and building ourselves up and instead fighting wars? Who knows? And it's probably not going to pass the Senate because a lot of people are against it, because this was a part of a defense bill that would authorize $895 billion in military spending. But hey, welcome to the land of the free. I mean, free for the rich, not you. You're going to war maybe. And you don't get a say right here in the good old USA. And boy, people are mad that women are involved. That's because here in the good old USA, men and women are separated. Yeah, try.
That's another thing, too, that has been mentioned, right? Like some people are also saying that this could also include women as well. So women, like, don't think that you would be immune. Again, I don't think this is going to pass in the Senate. I hope it doesn't pass in the Senate. But you have to know about this because I want you to see what your representatives are trying to do. And they were kind of quiet about this one. They were kind of quiet about it. I want to bring up this point here. From civil disobedience, every male already has to sign up for selective service at age 18. I had to in 1995. Yes. So if you already are required to do it, why would they make it automatic, right? That tells me that everyone hasn't been doing it. That's what that tells me. Now, military recruiting is down. I've been discussing this for the past 2 years. Younger people are choosing not to join the military. It's not as popular as it used to be. I mean, I remember when I was graduating high school, most of my classmates were either joining the military or they were going to college or they were continuing working at the businesses that they already worked at. Like, so some of them already had part-time jobs and they were going to try to work their way up there. Some people were trying to go to AmeriCorps, like all these different programs, but it wasn't uncommon for people when I was graduating high school to join the military, sometimes as a last resort because they wanted the benefits. But that has changed over the years. I want to take you back to 8 months ago when News Nation actually covered this about the military recruitment problem. I've been warning people about this, and I was afraid that they would try to do something like this. Listen.
Well, it is no secret the U.S. military has had trouble hitting recruiting targets these last couple of years. Earlier this year, the Department of Defense estimating the three primary branches, the Army, Navy, and Air Force, would fall short of their recruitment goals for 2023 by up to 10,000. Some of this has to do with the current worker-friendly job market and the fact that the pandemic kept recruiters out of high schools for a period of time. But physical fitness tests weeding out potential recruits and at times disqualifying soldiers who must pass a physical twice a year have played a role as well. Washington correspondent Evan Lambert is live at the Pentagon. So, Evan, it sounds like we're seeing changes in the way various branches assess physical fitness in response to this.
Now, let's pause. So they wanted to blame this due to physical fitness. They're not able to pass the physical fitness requirements for the military, which are actually pretty strict, by the way. I know one person in particular that did not get into the Air Force because they didn't pass the body taping test. So they actually were taping. I don't know if they still do this now, but at that point in time, they actually tape your body, and that's what they go by, not necessarily how much you weigh. So you could weigh like, I don't know, maybe 100 and let's say 40 pounds, but let's say like you might be a little on the thick side. You know, she didn't make the weigh because like she had, you know, bigger twins. Let's just say she had some big twins out there, right? So she didn't pass the body taping because of that. So that can be pretty strict. But the reality is, which they leave out of this conversation, they're trying to blame it on physical fitness. It's not just about physical fitness. there are fewer people choosing to join the military. And that's just the reality. And I said before, the younger generation, they don't find it appealing. They're more likely to criticize the U.S. foreign policy actions that have happened over the years. They're less likely to be willing to join the military. And they left that out of this conversation. Let's continue a little bit more here.
Kelly, we'll get to that in just a second, but in many ways, physical fitness and recruitment for the different branches going hand in hand. The biggest problem that we're seeing, according to officials, is that plummeting number of young people who are eligible to serve both physically and academically. And that leads to this dismal recruiting environment that we've seen backed up by numbers. Top military brass estimated the Army, Navy, and Air Force would not make their enlistment goals for 2023. That is the fiscal year that ended yesterday, short by 10,000, 6,000, and 10,000 recruits, respectively. The services that are meeting their goals for the year are the Marines and Space Force, which do not seem to have the same problems as their counterparts, at least when it comes to this year's enlistment numbers. Pentagon leaders blaming a few things here. First, the pandemic severely restricting in-person recruiting efforts in high schools, a lack of connection with military service for possible recruits, and also that competitive private job market. Those are the reasons that potential enlistees aren't signing up, they say. There is a bright spot, though, Kelly. The Army has seen success with a pilot program that we witnessed last year to get recruits in better physical and academic shape and ready for boot camp. There have been nearly 9,000 recruits graduating from that program about a year after its debut. And now the Army has simplified the often dreaded tape test for soldiers, measuring now just 1 point at the waist to gauge body fat. That is expected to have more soldiers failing that test, but they are able to appeal it essentially and use new technology, if available to them, where they're based. These body scans, these whole body scans that are supposed to be a more accurate way to measure body fat. They can.
Okay, so let's chime in here for just a second. So the recruitment numbers have decreased, but it's not because the military is no longer recruiting. Military are still appearing at high schools. He mentioned the pandemic, but this is last year. This was 2023, right? So a lot of those restrictions were already lifted in reference to the pandemic. That being said, I remember military recruiters came to my high school. I remember they came to my college. Like, I never remember not seeing them at some point in time. So those things didn't stop, but younger people are choosing not to because they don't want to fight in these wars. And what I noticed from this segment about News Nation is not once did they mention that in this segment. They said, well, they just don't meet the physical fitness requirements. Yeah, but that doesn't count the people who are choosing not to sign up at all. So it's very clear they did not want to have that discussion. Now, Dennis Kucinich is very livid about this. He's actually started a petition against this because he's been warning people too that it was a possibility that something like this could happen. I want you to hear from him. He's been very vocal about this. Do not sign up for the military. Do not sign up to go fight in these wars. Listen to this.
This is former Congressman Dennis Kucinich with an urgent message for young Americans. The House of Representatives has just passed a law which will automatically register all 18 to 26-year-old males preliminary to a draft. At present, 18-year-olds are required to register. But this bill will require or will cause young people to go into the draft system automatically for the first time since 1972 and the war in Vietnam. Now, I'm opposed to automatic registration. You know, I oppose it on constitutional grounds, and I oppose it because it's only to build up an army of young people to send to fight and die in foreign wars. Your liberty and your life is at stake here. The Senate version of the bill will require young women ages 18 to 26 to register for selective service preliminary to a draft. Make your voice heard. Join with me in stopping this erosion of individual rights. Please sign the petition. Thank you.
Now, Dennis Kucinich is one of those, former politicians. Actually, he's running for Congress as an independent. And he told me he thinks that he believes he has a good chance of winning because it's his old district and the people in the community know him very well. But just imagine if Dennis Kucinich was in Congress right now. Would Dennis Kucinich have voted for this? No. This was a bipartisan bill. On both sides of the aisle, they want your son, your daughter, your brother. They want your family members to go die in their wars. And there's no other way to frame it but other than that. That's what they want to happen. So Dennis Kucinich does have this petition. I do want to show you that here as well, where you can sign up and protest against this. Why and where will we be sending our kids to war? Take action for our nation's youth. Our government is planning a big draft, setting in motion a process where millions are automatically registered with Selective Service. It goes on to say, this is at a time when our government is expanding wars globally. The House just passed a defense authorization bill, which provides for automatic Selective Service registration, which then places each individual in the system for a potential draft call up. Currently, 18-year-old males would, at their own instance, register with the Selective Service. Why an automatic registration for the draft for the first time since 1972 during the Vietnam War? Automatic registration is a draft dragnet. It makes it easier for the government to use a multitude of databases to track young Americans for purposes of conscription. So I want you to think about all of those guys, the videos that you've seen of Ukrainian men being pulled off the streets and pulled into vans to go fight in their wars. You know, this is essentially the same thing, although they're not pulling you off the street yet, but they're still pulling you to go fight in their wars, to go die for this country. It makes it easier for the government to use that. Oh, sorry. There are serious constitutional issues with automatic registration for Selective Service leading to conscription, including violation of the Fourth Amendment privacy rights and Fifth Amendment due process rights. This goes against the spirit of individual liberty, which the founders of our country established. Thomas Jefferson on conscription, our people had learned to consider it as the last of all oppression. So Eric, if you can put the link to this petition in the chat so people can sign against this, and let your representatives know that you are not in favor of this. And I warned people, I had a feeling that this was going to happen. And I said that because the recruitment was low, and you have military recruiters trying to recruit kids on Twitch, all over the place. The recruitment is low, and we have more wars. We have the war with Russia and Ukraine. Joe Biden said he would not be against sending U.S. troops to go fight for Russia and Ukraine. Like, this is crazy. You have Israel's assault on Gaza. Let's not forget Aaron, right? Don't forget about the gentleman who set himself on fire because he did not want to go fight Israel's war and kill Palestinian people. Let's not forget about why he did what he did, because he knew they were trying to recruit Air Force members to do just that. And if you think it doesn't get to the point where our government will be willing to send army troops, Marines, Navy over to Israel to fight against the Palestinian people, to tear down those people, again, they do not have a military. Gaza does not have a military. Don't be surprised. It could happen. All for war. Now, Eric made a really good point. Why is this all happening at the end of the day? Of course, the draft should be banned. But why do we have all these wars and militarism? Big money and corruption is at the root. Nothing will really change until we connect those dots and get in the streets to demand an end to it. MC/DS 11 demands.org. And this is 11 demands that Eric has created here, right? So one of the things that he brings up is money. Big money runs everything in DC. The answer to all the why questions in politics is the same. Why are Democrats so weak? Why are Republicans so vicious? It's because they are paid to be that way, right? Corruption. Our so-called representatives do not represent us. They represent the billionaires, banks, and mega corporations. They must be called out relentlessly as what they are: corrupt. demands. Have a clear list of demands is crucial, and fixing big money in politics and government needs to be at the top. Solutions flowing from the demands are solutions. A movement has to be about more than just pointing out all the problems we face. It needs to provide a vision of a better world and a path to reaching it. Toward those ends are the 11 demands strategy. So again, at the end of the day, Eric is correct. The answer to a lot of this, but why is this happening? But why when it comes to our government is because of money and corruption. And Eric has put the link to that in the chat. So on your free time, you can check out 11 demands. We've covered it as well on this show before a couple of times, but this is not okay. Do you want your son to go fight their wars against his will? Is that what we're doing now? We cannot go back to the days of Vietnam War. We cannot go back to those days. Think about that. When it's time to vote, think about it. Let's go to some of the comments here. JB says, good afternoon, everyone. Excited for this panel this Thursday on RBN. Forehead kisses. Yes, JB and I are having a panel this Thursday on RBN. Don't miss that. It's going to be really good. We're having a reparations panel. I think Marcel Dixon's going to be there. JB sent me a list of the names, but I know Marcel is one of the ones that's going to be there. So don't miss that panel. That should be really based. Thank you for the super chat, Eric. Roger. Sorry, I said Eric. Eric must not be with you today. Eric is with me today. I don't know what that means. P. Walker, Candace Owens, Brianna, Sabby, and Kim Iverson should make their own show opposite The View. That would be an interesting show. That would be an interesting show. That would be something. Thank you, Cindy. Love Brie, love Sabby, love Tim Black, love Jordan Sheraton, love all the serious people. Thank you, Julio. Salute. Keep spreading the truth. Thank you. Civil disobedience. Oh, I said that one. Sorry. Thank you, Green Coalition. Love. Hashtag Jill Stein 2024. Join us. I will be present at the Jill Stein event Wednesday night, by the way, guys. I'll remind you again on Tuesday. Yes, Angelique, big tatas. When I said twins, I said my friend had big twins, but yeah, big tatas. Rez, love your pod, free Palestine. Thank you. Thank you, In. Thank you for exposing foreign government influence in our country and how Israel are more important than our homeless, the poor, and veterans. Yeah, we don't want to take care of our own people. Our government doesn't want to. And thank you, CM. Everyone in the chat is beautiful. That's so sweet, CM. Giving those Sunday vibes. All right. If you haven't had a chance to do so, go ahead and smash that like button, guys. That helps me out with the algo. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. I think we got a comment on Rockfin, Eric. Let's take that one before we go to the next story. Thank you for the tip on Rockfin, Roger. Reconstruction era records reveal how formerly enslaved people were stripped of land. Yes. Sabby, if you can put this in the YouTube chat for people to listen to the interview later, they just have to hit the play button next to the words that say 36-minute listen. Thank you. I think Eric can do that. Thank you for this. Then they can sit back, relax, and get educated. I will be posting it on X towards the end of your show through dropping off these customers. Thank you. And thank you for this one as well. SAB, here is a list of states that allow automatic voter registration. Imagine if all the high schoolers said, no, take me to prison. They would stretch the prison industrial complex beyond capacity, possibly breaking it. To all my GCers, notice all the G.I. Joe after school cartoons been streaming on YouTube 24/7 the past 2 years. Top Gun, Maverick. Yeah, I know. When the new Top Gun movie came out, I was like, are they trying to convince younger people to join the military? Thank you for this, JVB. The Unity War Party wants your kids. Kucinich is right on target. We need to get real. Let's demand their kids first on the front lines. I bet you those senator kids won't be going. Thank you for this as well, Roger. Zoomers, if they kidnap you off the street, Ukraine style, and put you in the military, get a dishonorable discharge, rebel against your sergeants. Knock them. We can't say that on here, Eric. I mean, Roger, sorry. Do what you got to do to get out. Okay, let's go ahead to the next story here. This one is not as heavy as that one. I told you we had a heavy story today. Morning Joe apparently has another show now called Morning Mika, where it's just Mika, not Mika and Joe Scarborough. So I know, cringe. Anywho, someone sent this to me. They apparently are trying to find a way to shame young people once again. This time it has to deal with dating and the fact that they're not getting married. But what is this really about? And I'm going to teach you how to read between the lines here and to pull back the cover off what they're really trying to explain to you. In this panel, you'll see there's Mika, there's also Simone Sanders and Jen Psaki. They are complaining because young people are not getting married. Young people are not dating. I wonder why. Let's get into it.
A growing number of younger Americans aren't dating. They're not hanging out. And no, they're not even hooking up. For so many women who want to date men, dating has become a total nightmare. And there are a number of reasons why. I'm Mika Brzezinski here with Simone Sanders Townsend, Huma Abedin, and Jen Psaki. So I have heard from a lot of young women who want to date young men that there are none. There are no guys. They're trying to connect. They often use dating apps, but find a total lack of connection. And it seems that the men they are meeting don't really share the same priorities.
All right, let's go ahead and interrupt there. So first of all, why are they so concerned about whether or not young people are hooking up? Now, all of a sudden, this is a cause for concern. Why are they so concerned? They're saying these young women are not meeting men. They're not dating. It's just not happening. They're having problems out there. First of all, as long as I can remember, and yes, I am married, but as long as I can remember, even when I was single, dating was never what I would call easy, especially once you were out of school. Once you were like not in high school or you were no longer in college, I do feel like dating was even more difficult than it was when you were in school. But I never remember dating being easy. But why are they concerned about this? Why are they upset that these kids are supposedly not hooking up? What can happen when you hook up? Tell me in the chat. What can happen? There's a possibility of pregnancy, right? You could get pregnant. Having children, right? They want you to have kids. Someone said STD. Come on, CM. Come on. What if? Come on, CD. Why you go there, CD? CM. CM said STD. That's true. That can happen. But they want you to have children. Why do they want you to have children? Those children don't remain children. They grow up, they become adults, and they have to get a job. They want workers. They want more workers. We'll get into the rest in just a second. Let's continue.
If they show up. Women, especially career-driven women, say the men they're meeting are more interested in sex and not looking for a deeper connection, and that it's becoming more and more of a problem. So what's changing?
So here we're going to go ahead and debunk something she just said, right? So earlier she told you that they're not even hooking up, but now she's telling you that the women that she spoke to said that the men just want to have sex with them. But I thought you just said they weren't hooking up. So which is it? Let's continue.
Not that long ago, people used to meet each other through work, let's be honest, or through friends, maybe at a bar or in a college campus. And it gave people a chance to actually learn about each other, to break through the filters, to demonstrate kindness and show commitment and values, to actually earn affection. But today, so many people are living life through a screen. They're not going out nearly as much, not to church, not to movies, or even to the office. Opportunities to fall in love are falling by the wayside, meaning people are making decisions by swiping left on their smartphones rather than truly learning to connect. The highs, the lows, the disappointments, all of that stuff. It's all part of the process. And it's affecting mental health too. According to a recent study of people over the age of 18, those who used swipe-based dating apps experienced significantly higher rates of psychological distress, anxiety, and depression. Another study showed a link between using dating apps and experiencing loneliness, dissatisfaction with life, and this is a big one, a feeling of exclusion from the world, feeling so left out.
Let's pause here for just a second and see what else is happening here. This is a way, in my opinion, of them to get you offline. They want the young people to get offline. Now, yes, do some young people spend too much time online? Absolutely. Some people are online on Twitter all day. Some people are online all day, yes, but not everyone. Why do they want you to get offline? Why are they trying to pull you away from the social media apps? Remember, Morning Joe, these are the same hosts who criticized the TikTok videos that were pro-Palestine. They criticized the TikTok videos that were telling the truth about Israel and the apartheid that happens in Israel. Mika and Joe Scarborough criticized that. They said these kids are getting all their information online and they're getting misinformation. So they're talking about dating. And yes, like I said, I never remember dating being easy, but this is also something else. It speaks to the fact that they want the young kids to get off of social media. They don't want the young kids to get their information from social media or independent media. They want you to listen to them. So it's not just about the dating. Now, I want to highlight this comment here, and we're going to get to this as well. 4737 said, no, Sabby, it's not about them wanting workers. Men just don't want relationships with modern Western women because they're vile. We'll get to that in just a second, Carlin, but let's get back to the video.
And when women do go to coffee shops, what we're hearing is that they try, or to a club or the grocery store, or anything where they get out and interact with people, they say the men that they want to meet just don't share their ideals. It's partly because so many young men are spending their lives also logged in, overly influenced by a flood of whatever you can find online, porn, video games, toxic masculinity. Who needs the real thing when you can get something better, and I put that in quotes, by scrolling? Here's what Scott Galloway, professor of marketing at NYU, told us on Morning Joe about some of the reasons why men are becoming like this.
I think you have the most talented, well-resourced people in the world and companies trying to convince a young man that he can have a reasonable facsimile of life in his basement behind a screen. You don't need friends. Go on Reddit or Discord. You don't need to get a job. Go on Robinhood or Coinbase and trade crypto and stocks. You don't need to go through the rejection and the expense and the humiliation and working out and having a plan and humor and showering to get a romantic relationship. You have YouPorn. So we have an entire generation, especially of young men, who are out home sequestering from society and missing out on what it means. You know, there's a reason romantic comedies are 2 hours and not 15 minutes. True victory in life is hard. Going out, meeting someone, finding mentors, finding mates, that stuff is hard, but that's what real victory in real life is like. And because a lot of men feel rejected on dating apps, the number of jobs that are accessible to them has gone down. You have essentially a group of men who are saying, I want a low-risk entry into life, and they go down a rabbit hole. When they don't have social connections, and they don't get out, and they don't have the prospect of a romantic relationship, they're more prone to conspiracy theory, they're more prone to misogynistic content, they're less...
There it was. Did you hear it? More prone to conspiracy theories. And that can be anything nowadays, right? So they are really, really frustrated about the information that younger people have learned about the creation of Israel, that younger people have learned about the US government. Don't forget how angry they were when they saw that younger people were talking about Osama bin Laden's letter to America, which somehow had resurfaced over the past couple of months. So don't forget about that. Don't forget that The Guardian removed that article that contained Osama bin Laden's letter to America after it started trending again on TikTok. So he just let it out the bag right there. Conspiracy theories, he says.
It's likely to believe in climate change, and some become really bad citizens. We are producing too many of the most dangerous person in the world, and that is a young, broke, and lonely young man.
So here we are. It's all men's fault. Blaming the men, young, broke, lonely. Right. Economics doesn't have anything to do with this, right? Dating isn't cheap. Dating is expensive. Everything costs more now. Everything. Imagine if you go out on a date Friday night with one girl and then Saturday night, another date. And depending on where you're going to, that could easily almost be $200 because you're not just paying for them, you're paying for yourself too. Everything costs more now. So there's that. We can't forget about that. They want to blame the men. They want to blame the women. They want to blame young people. They want to blame everything other than what's right in front of their face. They don't want to point fingers at the economic reasons. They don't want to point fingers at the fact that a lot of people cannot afford to get married. They can't afford to buy a house. They can't afford to start a family. And for Mika to sit up there and say, these young kids are stuck inside and they're stuck on social media, they're not meeting people in person. Well, you guys seem to be totally fine with that during the pandemic. During the pandemic, you guys were totally fine with the states that decided to lock down. And if you didn't live in a state that was locked down, don't come for me because my state was locked down. And if you did not have that experience, you don't know what that experience was like, where everything was closed. You couldn't even go to the grocery store at a certain time of the day. The morning hours were left for elderly to grocery shop. So you had to go within a certain window to get food from the grocery store. Not to mention, you're mad at the kids being online. Were you mad about that when they sent the kids home to learn remotely? To do school at home, and not all the kids had the resources that they needed to do well, and that's why the grades suffered? Were you upset about that then? Don't people realize that part of the reason why some people are still heavily online and not doing as many things in person is because some people still have pandemic brain? Those of us that lived in the lockdown states, I know people today that still don't feel comfortable going to events that have a larger number of people. It's very real. So where was that criticism then? You're talking about something that lasted for not just a couple of months, you're talking about a couple of years. And then you're mad that people don't want to get close to each other. Didn't you tell us to stand 6 feet apart? Let's continue. It's a hot mess.
Wow. As Professor Galloway pointed out, 1 in 3 relationships used to begin at work. Now young people are not going into the office as often. And if you are a young man at work, are you more or less inclined to express some sort of romantic interest in a potential partner now than you were 40 years ago? The answer is clearly no. And by the way, men and women have been told in many places that if you have feelings for someone at work, you have to go to HR first. That'll kill the moment. And I get why that's the policy. I get how we got here. Having said that, the unforeseen consequences of the Me Too movement, or of Me Too in general, and the problems that began the movement, that's a show we need to do at some point. And we have to have a really honest conversation about that. But that's not this show.
So look at who's on this panel, right? So you got Jen Psaki, of course, you got Simone Sanders, right? So all of these women are of a particular class. A lot of younger people are broke, not because they choose to be, but because everything is so freaking expensive. You got young people living like minimalist, trying the minimalist lifestyle, not necessarily because they want to, some do, but also because they can't afford it. They can't afford all these things. So remember that when you listen to this discussion, these women are of a particular class. I'm not in their class. I think a lot of you watching are not in their class. Some of these women on this screen are making millions. So it's easy to say that and point fingers at these young people for not dating as much as you want them to, but they also don't have the means that you have.
Saying having to go to HR is kind of a hard start. Jen, why don't you start? What are the biggest concerns you have here?
Yeah, look, Mika, first of all, I met my husband at work at the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. He asked me out over email and brought me ice cream. It was a much more traditional way of meeting someone. Look,
of course she did. I personally do not recommend dating your coworkers. You guys do whatever you want to do. But as someone who did that in the past, it's great as long as it works out. It's great as long as it works out. But if it doesn't work out, and then you realize the dude turns out to be kind of nutso because you're not dating anymore, and you still got to work there. Not just necessarily dating at work, but imagine dating someone in the same department. I don't recommend that at all.
I think the biggest concern I have here is the mental health impact on young people. And we've seen that in statistics and a ton of reporting about the disconnect. And you just went over a fair amount of it for men, certainly, and also for women. And I just think anecdotally of talking to a lot of women I work with, who I have the pleasure of working with on my team, they, men and women have been wanting to just have sex for decades, right? That's not new. I think they're still probably they're hooking up still, right? But it's more about that deeper connection. And as Scott said, relationships are work. Emotional connections are work, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a boyfriend, a girlfriend, whatever it may be, or a mentor relationship. And there's such a cotton candy aspect of the world we're living in right now. That's also a fantasy world, right? You mentioned porn. That's, of course, on the sex side. But it's also just how people portray themselves on social media. It's not connected to the difficulty and the struggle that often you have to go through in order to have the most rewarding relationship, the most rewarding friendships, the most rewarding mentorships. And the mental health impact is the biggest concern, because connection is what makes life joyful. And that to me is what I worry about the most.
Let's talk about the mental health concerns here, right? So I would say that I think a lot of younger people that are dealing with depression or loneliness, and don't get me wrong, there are clinical diagnoses here for some people as well. But I think a lot of this is coming from capitalism. Being broke, not being paid enough, food being expensive. Think about young people and what they're told about their future. The future doesn't look too great for them. Doesn't look too great. How do you expect them to feel? How do you expect them to feel when they're doing what they were told to do? They're choosing to go to college and get these degrees so that they can be successful, only to find out a lot of these jobs are disappearing because of AI or because of failing companies. How do you expect these kids to feel? There is a genocide happening right now, but you say you're concerned about their mental health? Are you? All of these women are out of touch. This is a big part of the problem. I don't know if this is supposed to be like this Morning Mika segment now is supposed to be like their version of The View, but these women are out of touch with these kids. I worked with these kids, so I know how they feel. Why don't you ask those kids what they really want? These kids would rather have experiences than things. And if that means they want to go see the world, they'd rather go see the world than have a bunch of stuff. And some of you on this panel are sitting in penthouses, Mika. So it's easy to point fingers at these young kids, but you're not in their shoes. And Mika's never been in their shoes because Mika comes from a wealthy family, a well-recognized wealthy family. Let's go on a little bit more. It's cringe, I know.
Yes, Simone, Americans are more lonely and isolated than ever. There's data on this. And what do you make of Professor Galloway's remarks on Morning Joe that we're producing too many of the most dangerous people in the world, namely young, broken, lonely men?
Mika,
were you worried about us being lonely when you told us to stay home? When they told us to stay home during the pandemic, when they told us to stand 6 feet apart from people, were they worried about us being lonely then? Were they worried about that? Were they worried about when they told us don't have contact with the delivery person coming to your door, just tell them to leave the stuff outside and do no contact delivery? Were they worried about us being lonely then? No. During the height of the pandemic, when they were promoting the lockdowns, none of these women on this panel were worried about your lonely ass.
I thought that a lot of Professor Galloway's comments were interesting. I listened to the whole segment twice yesterday because one, I think that people are going out, and also I don't think that I didn't meet my husband at work. I actually met my husband going out. I was at an event. After the event, some folks introduced, at the time he was what was known in Washington, D.C. as the Nightmare. And some folks that I know asked me, oh, do you know the Nightmare? I said, I've heard of him. I do not know him. I've never had the pleasure. And that was I like to say we've been dating ever since. I think he might take issue with my timeline. So I would argue that people are going out in different social settings. But I also think the apps, for example, are not terrible. One of my best girlfriends met her husband on the apps. You know, I know a lot of people who are meeting folks on the apps, and it is opening up, frankly, the world of the dating pool bigger than just who comes to your neighborhood bar or who you might see in the office. And so I think that is a good thing. Look, I think.
Pause. Is this the woman? Miss Winnie says Humma is dating George Soros' son. Cringe. The woman here in the bottom left-hand corner? I thought she looked familiar. Interesting.
About these lonely, broke, dangerous men. I don't really know, Mika. I'm not sold on the lonely, broke, and dangerous men. I think that we are producing a generation of younger people who do not have hustle and drive, and the lack of hustle and drive one is where I do agree with Professor Galloway, in that, you know, there's a younger generation of people who would rather be home than go out and socialize.
Pause. So do you see what's happening here? Young people don't have hustle and drive. And let's go ahead and debunk this word hustle, because it really pisses me off. Hustle should not be promoted. Stop saying this, okay? Can we stop saying this? I got my hustle. Yeah, I got 2 jobs because I had to get a hustle. You know, I got my hustle on. Stop saying that as a positive thing. There is nothing positive about having to hustle. What that means is that capitalism is not working. That's what that means. What that means is that you have to work multiple jobs and you can barely afford to take care of yourself. That is not something that should be praised. I do not like this praise of hustle culture. So for Simone Sanders to sit there and say they don't have hustle, they don't have drive. Nah, Simone, they're just not willing to sell out the way that you did. Okay, they're not willing to kiss the right asses like you did to get in your position. It really bothers me when people talk down about the youth like this. Once upon a time, we were all a part of the youth too. Once upon a time, I was in high school too. I was in undergrad too. And so was Simone. And think about what the other generations were saying about you when you were younger. So I'm a millennial. You know all the things that they said about us. They don't have hustle. They don't want to work. They don't want to do anything. A lot of these kids want to save the world. They don't have hustle. They don't want to work. They don't want to do anything. They don't have hustle, but they're out in the streets protesting every chance that they get. They don't have hustle and drive, but they're staking out. They had these encampments at the university for days, but they don't have hustle and drive. But they don't have no hustle. They don't have no drive. They just don't have the drive for what you want them to have the drive for. And I get really sick of these conversations where they're just bashing young people like this. It's really disgusting. Really disgusting. Not one young person on the panel. So who we got here? We got Jen Psaki, elitist. You got Simone Sanders, ass kisser and elitist. You got Mika, grew up in a wealthy family and is elitist. And then you got Humma here, who, according to the person in the chat, said is dating George Soros' son. Who the hell are all of you to talk about somebody having drive and hustle? You got to where you were because you were either born in it or you kissed up to the right person to get there, boo. Okay. Okay.
But I think the idea that folks are not going out, that folks are not socializing is not true. More so, I think it's that the pool of men that women would like to date is smaller. There's more women than men. It has always been that way. When I moved to Washington, D.C., that's what everyone said. It's like, for every one guy, there's 10 women that want to date him. So there's that.
Yeah. Well, I see the numbers that you're talking about. I really connect with your reticence about the lonely, broken, dangerous. I guess the inference that you have to have a woman to fix that. Like you can fix that yourself, and not be. I hear you about personal responsibility for sure. But I'm seeing in my world and hearing from a lot of young people who work with me, who work for me, who just they don't go out as much. There's like nowhere to go or no one to go with, or it's the same old every time, and they're on the phones so much. And whom I'm wondering, given the consequences of loneliness and isolation from a policy perspective, because the Surgeon General recently declared the loneliness is an epidemic. Is there an obligation on the part of our government or policies to address some of these growing social disconnects that are happening in our country?
So, I mean, I agree with so much. My mind is just spinning with thoughts hearing all three of you. And I'm glad you referenced the Surgeon General because the four of us talk about this a lot, that we are pioneers. We're raising a generation surrounded by technology that we just didn't have access to growing up. And we're still seeing the short and long-term impact of that. I love that you just mentioned the Surgeon General report. We talk about it in the context of just this. We're talking about it.
Yeah.
When you look at things like smoking, it's not that we think people are going to quit smoking or stop using tobacco, but when you buy a cigarette, it will say there's a warning that this is bad for your health. I was at an office meeting the other day and I saw, a box saying, here's, if you need Narcan, it's in this lockbox, get help. It's not that we think people are going to stop using drugs and that there might never be an overdose again. We are aware of it. We have a solution to it. And this is all part of public policy and the importance of having public policy. And I think to have that 80+ page report, number one, you have a Surgeon General who addresses his own issues with loneliness, deep feelings of loneliness, and what governments can do and schools and communities and parents can do. And to both what Jen and Simone just said, I think about this. I met my ex-husband at work, and I met my current boyfriend, and I will say, in a period where I was feeling very lonely and was invited to this party. I did not want to go. I just wanted to stay at home and just probably be on my phone, watch The Diplomat or something. I dragged myself to that party, and that is how I met him. And so it's we have to talk about it, but we also have to be open to experiences. Sometimes even at our generation, we have to push ourselves to do it.
So apparently, Eric has brought to my attention that Huma also was a former Hillary Clinton aide. So there you go there. So let's talk about the male-female issue here. One of the things that was raised in the chat about what Carlin said, it's just that men don't want relationships with modern Western women because they are vile. So let's talk about that for just a second. The women that they spoke to that are part of this survey, I'm interested to hear what type of men were they looking for, right? Are you looking for wealthy men? Are you looking for a guy that's making six figures? Does he also have to be tall, dark, and handsome? Does he have to drive a nice car? Because I think the more requirements that you have, if you're looking for all of that, I think it's going to be easier to say, oh, there's just no guys out there they don't want to date. Right. So that could be part of it as well. And in reference to what Carlin said, it makes me wonder as well. Is it true? Could it be true that some men just want something different now, and maybe they're not as attracted to what has become of women in the United States? I don't know. I know some of my male friends said they are more attracted to international women. or they prefer a woman that is more feminine. There are some guys that do want women that are more feminine. And maybe it could be the male female roles in a relationship. There are some men who still value that, where they want to be the head of the household, that type of thing. I don't know. What I do know is that the more requirements I think that you have, the harder it is going to be to find someone. And not just find someone, but it's like you have to find someone, but you have to find the person that you actually end up having some type of chemistry with, and who has chemistry with you back and likes you back. This is why I've always said I never remember dating being easy. I never remember that. You could like someone and they may not like you, or vice versa. And then you just may not ever fall in love with that person. You know, it's not as easy as people say it is. So what Ozzy said, go find me a Russian. Oh my God. But I think the reason that they're more concerned is, again, because if younger people are not getting married and they're not starting families, then obviously that means that the population is not increasing. And they want the population to increase. They want younger people to have kids because they're thinking about the labor force down the line. And this is another thing that I think Elon Musk had talked about this before, where he said people need to have babies so that the labor, you know, we need people to work. We need workers. There's that. But the other part of this conversation that I really want you to just pay close attention to, what they're really trying to do. They're trying to get the younger people to get offline, to get away from the social media apps, and to just basically listen to them, MSNBC and mainstream media, because of the information that younger people have been discovering from social media, particularly when it comes to foreign policy. You got to remember, again, Morning Joe was very critical of the younger kids that were protesting for the support for Gaza. They were very critical of the encampments, and they were very critical about young people not being pro-Israel. They brought the leader of the ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt, they brought him on Morning Joe multiple times since October 7th. So this is another thing. So it's not just about young people aren't dating and they're lonely. And by the way, just because you're alone doesn't mean you're lonely. So there's that. It's not just about young people not dating. I think this is a worker issue. And I also think that they are trying to control the level of information that younger people are getting. Because other than that, why do you care whether or not young people are hooking up? Why do you care about that? Because I don't. Like a mess. Let's go to some of the comments. Oh my God, there's a lot of them starred for this one. Shout out to Cognite for gifting a Sabby membership. Thank you, Cognite. Thank you. Thank you for the super chat, Sparky. Hello, Dream Girl Sabby. Hello, Sparky. Yeah, so apparently, you know, they're mad because younger people are not singing Meet Me at the Altar. You guys remember that song? Meet me at the altar in your white dress. Let's get married. I just want to get married. JB says capitalism is the biggest cock blocker of them all. We are broke. It's true. Oh, man. Thank you, 16 Voice. Trust me, there ain't no men for women talking down men like that. Yeah, it's always the man's fault. You notice that? They always want to blame the men. Thank you, Resurrect. Yuval Harari Sapiens explains why there is a decline in population. AI will take the place of many humans. There is an end goal of singularity. Thank you, Sparky. Nerds run the world now. By definition, nerds are socially challenged and have turned the last couple of generations into nerds who wouldn't know how to go about hooking up. Hey, nerds unite. Sebastian said, where's the conversation on the lives of young gay men? That's a good question. Thank you, Kinman. Sabby, what do you think of The Guardian? I think it's a liberal news outlet. I don't think they're that great on foreign policy issues either. They may be better than Morning Joe sometimes and better than CNN, but I don't think they're that great on it either. It's a liberal outlet. Adonis Media, thank you, Sabby. Never let those bastards live that down. Yeah, man, they're the ones that told us 6 feet apart. Thank you, Roger. Men wanting exes with no relationship is new to her. Lisa says, Mika got that faux part Andy Warhol wig like Joy and Reed. Oh, man. Thank you, Sparky. Dad wasn't particularly religious, but back in the 1940s, he and his crew would go to church to meet girls and maybe hook up afterward. Interesting. Guess people are meeting people at church. Thank you for the super sticker, Yantra. Thank you, CM. We don't even have access to the ass to kiss. That's that too. LPA says the workers of today are the hardest workers. Productivity has gone up while wages haven't. These people forget that. Yes, that's right. Miss Winnie, Mika's husband, Joe, had a young intern who was mysteriously found dead in his office. What? Okay, I have to look that one up. Miss Winnie, you knowing a lot today. Thank you, Kenman. Huma is a hardcore coconut. Thank you, Sparky. It wasn't so long ago when getting married and raising a family was the most common long-term goal for people. Nowadays, maybe not. It's a good point. Thank you, P. Walker. The growth of our system requires more and more debt. They need new debt instruments, and they used to be called babies. Ooh. And thank you, Sparky. For the last 60 years, the establishment has preached against overpopulation. Now they complain. They just can't make up their mind. They can't make up their mind. Meet me at the altar in your white dress. All right, let's get into this next story here about Kamala Harris. Brace yourself for this one because this event is apparently taking place tomorrow. Ladies and gentlemen, they are still continuing to spread the lie about the October 7 essay attacks from Hamas. Now, keep in mind, this has already been debunked by multiple outlets. The first one I heard do it was the Gray Zone, but now there are other more mainstream outlets that are saying there is no evidence to actually confirm that happened. However, even though I told you all of that, it appears that Kamala Harris is about to help Israel by continuing to spread this propaganda. Shout out to Z Squirrel for holding it down and always being first with the no on X. This Squirrel account is amazing. I wish I knew who this person was. This is insane. The Israeli regime, which has a direct line to the White House and Genocide Joe and Genocide Kamala, are doing yet another laundering of the debunked and exposed genocidal atrocity propaganda mass grape hoax featuring Sheryl Sandberg's debunked hoax documentary. And Z Squirrel is referring to this announcement here from CNN. Harris to shine light on horrific violence perpetrated during Hamas October attack. So here we go, ladies and gentlemen. This is what I've been telling you. They are still repeating this story, which has been debunked by multiple outlets. And they are still driving it home. But I'm going to show you later on in this segment why Kamala Harris is doing this, because they uniquely came to her, and I'll show you why. Let's go on here a little bit. Vice President Kamala Harris is expected to host a White House event focused in part on the Israel-Hamas war on Monday as part of an effort to highlight conflict-related sexual violence and amid fraught negotiations to reach a ceasefire agreement. So you guys see this? Harris has forcefully spoken about the situation unfolding in Gaza. Go down here. Monday's event also comes as the administration has publicly placed enormous pressure on Hamas to accept the hostage and ceasefire proposal and heighten its rhetoric about the Israel-Hamas war. Planning for the event had been underway for months, according to a source familiar. Peep this. Let's highlight this. This is wild. Oops, I highlighted the wrong one. Sorry. Here we go. Harris will deliver remarks at the White House on conflict-related sexual violence, followed by a panel discussion of survivors and experts from around the world and a partial screening of the documentary film Screams Before Silence, which talks about the accused essay on October 7th from Hamas. Remember, this is the Sheryl Sandberg film. So, does everybody see what is happening here? Kamala Harris is continuing to repeat the propaganda from Israel. This isn't something that Kamala decided to do on her own. This is something that she was told to do. And I'll explain to you why. Why are they continuing to repeat this lie? Why are they continuing to do this, knowing that they still, till this day, have no forensics evidence? Now, you remember it was just a month or two ago that Hillary Clinton was the one that was hosting events at Columbia University to talk about this supposed essay on October 7th. Notice that Hillary's not saying too much about this anymore ever since it has been debunked by multiple outlets. In particular, the UN has also debunked this. So now they get their puppet Kamala Harris to be the one to continue this discussion. The vice president spent her career as a prosecutor working to protect women and girls from violence. She has continued their leadership globally. The vice president has worked to ensure that conflict-related essay and a focus on the status of women and girls remains at the forefront of our national security policy making. So all of a sudden they care about women so damn much, right? Right? Why isn't Kamala Harris having a discussion about the detention centers of Palestinians where there has been documented evidence that show that they have endured assault? Why isn't she talking about that? I mean, if you're going to talk about people that have been assaulted, if you're going to talk about SA, shouldn't you cover it on both sides? If you believe that this is true, what Israel is saying that Hamas did, if you believe that, shouldn't you cover the assaults that have happened to Palestinian people as well? No. Not if you're trying to push a certain narrative. Earlier this year, the Association of Rape Crisis Centers in Israel published a report that found Israeli civilians suffered brutal SA that were carried out systemically and deliberately during Hamas October 7 attacks. Again, I want to reiterate that the gray zone and multiple outlets have debunked this multiple times. The report, which includes testimonies from witnesses, first responders, forensics experts, let me highlight here. See how this article is lying? And news articles say Hamas militants who entered Israel used extreme acts of SA against their victims and in most cases killed them after or even during the assault. So they're already lying here. Forensic experts. There has been no forensics evidence to prove that this happened. But CNN is continuing that lie. According to the evidence collected by ARCCI, an umbrella organization for 9 regional rape crisis centers, it says that men, women, and children were all victims of SA on October 7th. So now all of a sudden it's men, women, and children. I thought it was just the women. This story just continues to change, doesn't it? The report outlines witness testimony of the brutality of those crimes, including gang assault at the Nova Music Festival in the desert of southern Israel. Again, they have no evidence to back this up as well. 2 former hostages who were released in late November describing witnessing and about hearing the hostages being assaulted while in captivity. So they're still bringing up the 2 former hostages that came forward in November. Their story also was already debunked. So what you have to remember is that these people are saying exactly what the Israeli authorities want them to say. with no evidence. So Kamala Harris is hosting this event to shine the light on these attacks that they say took place, which they have no evidence of, right? We go back to Z Squirrel because I want to show you something else as well. Like our government, they're just such liars. Not only does the hoax by Sheryl Sandberg include explicit proven lies about non-existent photos and other deranged claims from proven hoaxers, it also launders actual torture. The White House is going to gleefully launder actual torture now for Israel. Again, where is the discussion about the Palestinians that are being tortured at the detention center? CNN and the New York Times actually covered that. So why isn't Kamala Harris talking about that? It's a mess. You guys, it's an actual mess. An actual mess. So they even said so here. So this was the Electric Intifada, who has been phenomenal about this. In May, in her hoax documentary, Sheryl Sandberg has a dramatic scene where she says to proven Zaka hoaxers to show her photos of the violence and mutilation. Sandberg withdraws in horror, oh my God, but she never actually showed the photos. Right. Because it probably did not happen. What kind of documentary is this? Now, peep this, fam. Even Haaretz and the UN are debunking this. And we'll bring this article up here and you can see October 7th, Israeli assault allegations disproven by the UN and Haaretz, also by the Electric Intifada and the Gray Zone. Let's pull up Haaretz first. And it says here, we'll go right down here. At the Shura base, to which most of the bodies were taken for purpose of identification, there were 5 forensics pathologists at work. In that capacity, they also examined the bodies that arrived completely or partially naked and examined the possibility of SA. According to a source knowledgeable about the details, there were no signs on any of the bodies attesting to sexual relations having taken place or mutilation. There's no forensic evidence to prove that any sexual activity even took place. But Kamala Harris is going to discuss this as fact tomorrow. These teams did not document, down here at the other highlighted part, these teams did not document a single case of SA or cases of genital mutilation. Beyond this, from inquiries put to 3 bodies in defense establishment by Haaretz, it emerges that the intelligence material collected by the police and the intelligence bodies, including footage from terrorist body cameras, does not contain visual documentation of any acts of SA. Let's go on to the UN. The UN has come forward to say allegations of objects found inserted in females, etc., could not be verified. It goes on to say here, additional challenges emerged due to erroneous interpretations of the state of the bodies by some volunteer first responders without relevant qualifications and expertise, and mischaracterizing grazing gunshot wounds to genitalia as targeted genitalia mutilation using knives. See, this is the UN. We'll go to this paragraph here. This is 70. It also viewed reports of sexual violence, including one case of genital mutilation of a male, right? Of a male soldier and several female soldiers during the attack on the military base, which likewise could not be established. The UN also says down here at the bottom, because in most instances, additional injuries were also seen on other body parts, no discernible pattern of genital mutilation could be established. So the UN and Haaretz And don't also forget, the London Times has come forward and said there is no evidence, yet this woman made a whole entire documentary about it. Kamala Harris is going to be discussing this tomorrow night because she is a puppet and she'll do what AIPAC wants her to do, what the ADL wants her to do. And this is why when Kamala Harris gave this announcement or the speech fire on the bridge in Selma, this is why I called this optics. She was just acting. This was just an act. She is very much in line with the state of Israel. Otherwise, she wouldn't be sitting there. She is very much willing to do what the state of Israel wants her to do. Otherwise, she would not be sitting there. So when she told you this,
and given the immense scale of suffering in Gaza, there must be an immediate ceasefire. For at least the next 6 weeks, which is what is currently on the table. Hamas.
When she told you that, she was acting. That was all an act to convince voters, particularly younger voters, that her and President Biden were doing the best that they could to try to stop this assault on the Palestinian people. They never had any intention of doing that. It's a game. Now, why does Kamala have to be the one to lead this discussion? Probably because of something that happened in October 2021. Everyone may not remember this, but I do. In 2021, obviously before October 7th, Kamala Harris' office doing cleanup after exchange with a student on Israel. We're going to play this video here because I want you to see again. Oh, let me pull this out so I can. Let me make sure the ad doesn't play. 1 second. Sometimes the ad will play for that CNN article. Okay, it didn't. Let me pull it up. Here we go. This is what happened in 2021, and they never let Kamala forget it. Listen to this.
Hey. Hi, guys.
Vice President Kamala Harris is in damage control mode after this exchange with a university student earlier this week.
There were funds allocated to continue backing Israel, which hurts my heart because it's an ethnic genocide and a displacement of people. And I think that the people have spoken very often in what they do need. And I feel like there's a lack of listening, and I just feel like I need to bring this up because it affects my life and people I really care about's lives.
Harris responding in part.
Glad you did, and again, this is about the fact that your voice, your perspective, your experience, your truth should not be suppressed, and it must be heard. The point that you are making about policy that relates to Middle East policy, foreign policy, we still have healthy debates in our country about what is the right path, and nobody's voice should be suppressed on that.
Israeli publication.
Pause. So does everybody see what was happening there? In 2021, that was a student telling her about the apartheid situation in Israel and the way that Israel was treating the Palestinian people. The student told her to her face in 2021 that Israel was committing ethnic genocide way before October 7th. See, people don't realize you can always pull up old receipts. This is why they are coming for Kamala Harris, and they want her to be the one to host this event. Look at what happened after that conversation took place. Let's go back just a teensy bit. There we go.
And nobody's voice should be suppressed on that.
Israeli publications jumped on Harris for not pushing back against the student's characterization of Israel's actions towards Palestinians as ethnic genocide. And sources tell CNN calls came into the White House from several leading Jewish organizations expressing their concern. The vice president's office is now scrambling to minimize the fallout, putting out a statement today saying the vice president strongly disagrees with the student's characterization of Israel, that it was a student who voiced a personal opinion during a political science class.
So in 2021, because of that conversation that she had with the student about the ethnic cleansing that Israel was trying to do to the Palestinian people, all of these different Israeli organizations targeted Kamala Harris. A lot of people forget about this. So then all of a sudden, notice what they said, the White House is scrambling to combat this smear of Israel.
Emphasizing the vice president has been unwavering in her commitment to Israel. Harris's senior staff is working the phones, calling several leading pro-Israel organizations to make clear that Harris's silence did not equate agreement with the students' claim of ethnic genocide.
There's nothing wrong with criticizing policies of the state of Israel, but it's deeply problematic.
Pause. We'll come back. Now, this is Jonathan Greenblatt. He's the CEO of the ADL. Now, he just told you in this video there was nothing wrong with criticizing the policies of the Israeli government. That's not what Jonathan is saying now. Which goes to show you again, he never agreed with people criticizing the policies of Israel's government. Never agreed with that. Because now people like Jonathan are saying criticizing Israel, criticizing the Israeli government is anti-Semitic. Everybody see what's happening here. So notice the moment that Kamala received pushback because she didn't disagree with what that student said. Notice how all these different organizations, the Israeli organizations, the ADL, and all these other organizations came after her. Doesn't that sound familiar? Look at what's happening now. And every time you turn around, this guy shows up.
There's nothing wrong with criticizing policies of the state of Israel, but it's deeply problematic when you demonize or delegitimize the country, because we've seen how that kind of slander is used and can spark anti-Semitic incidents here at home.
This dust-up is just one in a series for the vice president in her 9 months on the job. In June, her first foreign trip completely overshadowed by her blunt delivery of this message to Guatemalan migrants.
I want to be clear to folks in this region who are thinking about making that dangerous trek to the United States-Mexico border. Do not come. Do not come.
That answer upsetting many, including members of her own party, and calling into question her diplomatic chops. Just days later, Harris causing headlines again by dismissing the criticism that she's never been to the border.
We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making.
There have also been reports about dysfunction and infighting in Harris.
Then they get into the dysfunction that was happening with Kamala's office at that point in time. But I wanted to show you that video from 2021 because I want you to understand the reason why Kamala Harris, they have her leading this event to continue to spread these lies is because Kamala owes them. When they came after Kamala in 2021, they set the record straight and let her know very clear, you do what we tell you to do or you're out of here. So when they all came after her like that, she knew she had to straighten up. Now, did she agree with what the student said? No, she didn't. But the problem is that she did not disagree with what the student said. And that's a problem that the ADL had. What that student said was correct. And maybe if more people would have listened to that student back in 2021, they would understand why what's happening now is happening. So Kamala Harris is hosting this event Monday at the White House. She is to shine light on horrific sexual violence perpetrated during Hamas October attack. She is hosting that event Monday, continuing to spread that lie, that propaganda from Israel. And that is because back in 2021, all of these organizations made it very clear to Kamala that we own you and you're going to do what we say. So this is a problem, again, when we talk about the Israeli lobby having such a strong hold on our politicians. So Kamala is there to continue the lies. However, the young people aren't falling for it. The young people aren't falling for it because check this out. At Stanford University's graduation, watch all the people, watch the number of people who walk out.
Terribly tragic wars have caused intense pain of loss and tensions throughout the community. But this morning, we want to celebrate your achievements in spite of a troubled environment. We will rely on you, your values, perseverance, and strength of character to make our world better. We will rely on you, your values, passion, perseverance, and strength of character to make our worlds better. While at Stanford, you've gained the tools and analytical skills to help you understand the world, analyze its shortcomings, and work on solutions that will make things better. The university has strived to give you the skills to listen to and learn from one another. I urge you to continue to be open to other points of view. Don't let your convictions shut out your ability to listen and learn. I want to urge you to embrace your futures with gratitude and with optimism, while acknowledging the suffering of others. You should feel gratitude to your family and to the Stanford community for an outstanding education that has equipped you for lives of exploration and learning. Genuine feelings of expressions of gratitude result in social cohesion and a stronger civil society. These social bonds are very
That's actually quite a large number.
much needed in the current context of division and polarization.
Yeah, like people are definitely tuning the speaker out. People are tuning the speaker out like whatever's. So that was actually a significant amount of students that walked out of the Stanford graduation. So that's the thing. The young people, they're not falling for it. They're not buying it. And that's why they got to send people like Kamala Harris on this, Israel propaganda tour to continue to spread the lies over and over again. Let's go to some of the comments here in the chat. Thank you so much for the super chat, Roger. Dead intern, old news, Sabs. Yeah, I didn't hear about that. I'll have to check. Thank you, Kyle. Hello. Showing support, love. Hope you are well, Sabs. Thank you so much, Kyle. I was on Kyle's show recently, you guys. Thank you, Janice. With isn't real, every accusation is actually a confession. There is no evidence of their claims, but plenty of evidence of them committing the crimes. Exactly. And you don't hear Kamala Harris hosting an event about what happened to the Palestinian people in those detention centers, do you? No, you don't. Thank you, Sparky. It's obvious. All the men aren't getting married because they're holding out for Sabby. No, Sparky. No. Let me get the comment on Rumble. Thank you. Thank you for the Rumble rant, Kim Manji. Huma's ex-husband was Anthony Weiner, who spent too much time online. Thank you so much for that. I forgot about that guy. His name was actually Weiner. All right, 2 quick announcements. Tomorrow, Monday, it is also Game 5. I want to send a special shout out to the Celtics. I hope you win tomorrow night. Check this out. This is on Facebook from Celtics Nation. Celtics won their last title on June 17th, 2008. Monday is June 17th, 2024. Boston area code is 617. It's all a part of the plan. I love this. I got to say, good luck. Good luck to the Celtics, because I actually went out to watch Game 4. I haven't been out to watch a game in a while. I've been watching them at home, but I went out to watch Game 4 on Friday night, and I could have just stayed home because the Celtics were playing like they went out drinking the night before. I was like, this is terrible. I know high school basketball players that can do a better job than this. But then it was brought to my attention again by one of the ladies that was at the pub, and she told me, she said, again, it's all about making money. because they don't want these teams to sweep, if you think about it. They need them to stay in longer. That's more money for promoters, advertisers, ticket sales. And then she asked me, when's the last time you remember a sweep? And I was thinking, last time there was a sweep in the finals. Was it the Lakers? Was it Kobe and the Lakers? I forget. Anyway, shout out to you guys. Shout out to the boys tomorrow. Let's hope they bring it home. We will be playing at home. So let's hope they can wrap this up tomorrow because my patience is wearing thin. Wearing thin. All right. Oh, you guys are giving answers. Tim said the Heat. AOH said Warriors swept the Cavs. Oh, yeah, that's right. Danny said Nuggets swept the Heat. Spurs versus Cavs. It's been a while. Been a while though, right? Makes you wonder. Hector said LeBron got swept in his finals appearance. Okay, there you go. All right, so it's been a while. And one more quick announcement. Tuesday night, don't miss this. We have a special guest. Tuesday night, Judge Joe Brown returns. I should have said Judge Joe Brown returns instead of Judge Joe Brown joins. Tuesday night, Judge Joe Brown will be back here. We have a lot to talk about as we're getting closer to the 2024 presidential election. It was a fun time when he was here last time, so look forward to that. It should be pretty cool. Yeah, so don't miss that. Tuesday night, 7 p.m. Eastern time, Judge Joe Brown will be back. We have a lot to discuss. So there. Yeah. And that leads me to our final news story. Smash that like button if you haven't had a chance to do so. If you're new, don't forget to like, sub, and share. Let's talk about talking to people that you disagree with. So I just told you Judge Joe Brown is going to be here Tuesday night. He's been here before. We don't agree on a lot of things, right? We agree on some things, but not a lot of things. And I think it's important that you do talk to people that you disagree with. Otherwise, you just remain in a bubble. It's just the reality, right? So that actually happened recently with Candace Owens and Brianna Joy Gray. Now, what do they currently have in common right now? Both of them have been fired because they have criticized Israel or not being pro-Israel from their respective networks. So Candace was fired from the Daily Wire. Brianna Joy Gray was fired from Rising. And they've been heavily attacked by pundits online, etc., saying, get rid of them, get them out of here, that kind of thing. So they both have gone through it. So Brianna Joy Gray actually went on to Candace's show. Now, one thing I will say as we get into this conversation is that I thought this interview was going to be much longer. As you can see, like Brie comes into the video a little bit later. The video is like 40 minutes, but she comes in a little bit later. So I did expect the interview to be longer just because, I mean, it's the first time they interviewed each other, right? So I expected to be a longer interview. I also didn't expect the discussion to just mainly consist of the firing at Rising and the censorship. I thought since it was their first time having this conversation, I thought there would be other things that would be discussed as well. But that didn't happen. I also don't know what the time constraints were. Like maybe they only had a certain amount of time and they had other things going on. I honestly don't know. But it did seem like towards the end of the interview, it does seem like Candace said that she would be open to talk to Brie again, hopefully on bad faith, about some of the other issues that I thought would come up during this discussion that didn't come up as much. So I want to go ahead and get into this interview. I do want to say this. I've always said, I told you guys, like, when Brie was invited by Candace publicly on Twitter, I said, I think if she's going to go on there, don't go on there and just be nice to her. Definitely hold her feet to the fire about some of the things that she said and some of the things that she actually says in this interview, right? So I will say that there are moments during this discussion where Brie does push back, But there were some parts, there are two moments in particular where I wish Brie would have pushed back harder, right? But maybe it was just a time constraint. I don't know. Let's go ahead and get into this discussion here.
And it's interesting to have you and I speaking because we are not on the same side of the political aisle. I mean, you are a person, your background, you were the spokesperson for the Bernie Sanders campaign. I mean, I was very much identified as a Trump supporter about as far as you could be in the media's eyes when he was running in 2016. And yet we do find ourselves allied in the belief that people in America should be able to criticize the actions of foreign governments without having their entire livelihoods risked. This is not normal. And yet there are so many people who know, like I know and like you know, that if you are in media, you got to be careful talking about Israel. Why is that?
Yeah, it really is the one true red line. And I think you experience that as being part of a media organization that I think rightly really prioritized and focused on various threats to free speech in various different contexts and across the political spectrum. But it really does feel like free speech except for when it comes to Israel, progressive except for when it comes to Palestine. I mean, there is this Palestine-sized hole or exception in a lot of people's principled stance against various issues. And I say progressive except for Palestine because there are similarly people on the left who say that they care about various groups, who say that they are anti-war, but who very similarly will look the other way or frankly become very oppositional when suddenly the people that we're talking about who are being under siege in a conflict are in fact Palestinian.
Yeah, and it's particularly interesting to see the way the media reports on these incidents, and I see it already in how they're speaking about your firing because they don't actually say what it is that you said that was controversial. I saw this when I left the Daily Wire. Andrew Klavan does this episode. He's like, she was saying things in a way, but he can't actually point to what I said because actually there was something that I said that was controversial. Unless you view a certain race to be just above critique, really is what it is. If you view a certain race to be above critique. And I found that when I was being lied upon by a man named Rabbi Barclay. I mean, he lied so badly about me that PJ Media wound up taking the article down after I interviewed him because I was genuinely curious. Like, how could you say you're a rabbi, you're supposed to be a leader in your community, and you're publishing lies about things that I never said. And when he spoke to me, he was very honest. And I realized, okay, he's actually just a racial supremacist. Mm-hmm. He's telling me that he believes that, if Jewish blood is shed, it does in fact matter more. When it is Jewish history, it matters more. And I appreciated his honesty, and I could see why we were going to be on the wrong side of this issue because I don't believe in racial supremacy, whether it's coming from BLM leaders talking about their list of demands for white people. I don't believe in racial supremacy if it's white people, and I certainly am not going to accept it if it's Jewish people. That's not something that anyone should accept.
Well, let's pause there for just a second. The supremacy part, because what was interesting is that I always say that sometimes you can advocate for something or you can be against something, right? Until it affects you directly, right? I never thought I would see Candace Owens having this conversation a year ago or 2 years ago because it didn't impact her directly. But once it started to affect her directly, where she was a direct target, then she saw it. Because I'll be honest with you, I saw this with Ben. I can't speak about the rest of the people at the Daily Wire, but I did see that with Ben Shapiro. I always saw Ben Shapiro as Israel first. And I don't know why Candace didn't see that, or maybe she just didn't view it that way. But from where I was sitting, I always saw Ben Shapiro as Israel first. Maybe sometimes it's harder to see it when you're a part of it, when you're like working with that same company or whatever, or I don't know, but I always saw that. Listen to this.
It'll come as no surprise to you, Candace, that I feel differently about when we can get more specific about your qualms with BLM, but with respect to Israel, I do think that what has become increasingly clear to people is that the ideology that sort of justifies a Jewish state created in the middle of an Arab land really requires a commitment to basically expelling, ethnically cleansing, and even committing what has been described by the ICJ as a plausible genocide against the population so that there can be a Jewish majority. And I know that's a sort of uncomfortable fact, but it's one that I think many people are coming to when you start to question why it is that Israel has made the choice to treat 5 million people who are in constructively occupied territory in both the West Bank and Gaza as second-class citizens for years and years, not to mention the 20% of Israel's population who are subject to about 60 different laws that discriminate against them in terms of housing, employment, and in other kinds of arenas. And
pause here for just a second because there's something else I want to bring up too. Yeah. Be Easy says, what power did BLM have to enact a supremacist agenda? Right. So another thing I want to mention when Candace did say BLM is that there's a difference between BLM, the organization, and BLM, the grassroots. And I think sometimes people conflate the two. So BLM, the grassroots, were the actual activists on the ground. BLM, the organization, which was not the same as the grassroots, it was corporate, right? They were trying to get money. They did get money. So we have to remember that. There were people that created the corporation, the organization, that decided to sell out to corporations. And it just became about like this money thing, this money scheme. So the organization made the grassroots look bad. But Black Lives Matter was not about supremacy. So do you see, this is one example where I wish Brie would have pushed back a little bit more. Now, it does sound like towards the end of this interview, there is a possibility to continue that discussion, possibly on bad faith. But I do wish, like when Brie said, well, we can get into BLM later, I thought they were going to get into that later in this interview, but that doesn't happen. So I really do wish Brie would have pushed back more there. Let's go on.
All comes down to when you start to listen to people explain why they think it's acceptable to, for example, kill over 270 Palestinians and murder so many children the way we saw just a few days ago in Gaza to rescue 3 hostages. You have people very openly saying it's justified. It would have been justified to kill 500, 1,000 Palestinians if it meant getting 3 hostages back. And I certainly understand prioritizing hostage exchange. And this is what I told to the sister of the hostage that I spoke to on Rising last week. Certainly, if you want to prioritize hostage exchange, I agree with that. And we should be talking about the protests that are being put on by the families of hostages in Israel against Netanyahu, because they rightly perceive him as being the primary obstacle to prioritizing hostage exchange over what he has said is his priority, which is eliminating Hamas. All that being said, there are ways to get the hostages back. It is evident, and could have gotten them back months and months ago if that were in fact the priority. But instead, the cost, the value of Palestinian life is perceived as so cheap as compared to Israeli lives. But we've seen instead that they would rather do these military organizations with the help of the U.S. government using a U.S.-built pier that cost $300,000, was told it was a humanitarian pier, using an action that was in fact a war crime, using a humanitarian vehicle to Trojan horse military officers into a refugee camp, and then kill almost 300 Palestinians in the effort to get 3 hostages back, and also killing, losing an Israeli soldier at the same time. Does that really seem worth it? I think the average person says no. And the only reason you come to a yes is if you really very cheaply value lives are not Israeli.
And you believe the supremacist ideology of Zionism. So the other thing too that I want to mention, because I don't want people to have confusion here, we also have to remember with BLM what was happening at that time. And it was a protest and a call, I think, like an outcry against police brutality. And this is what I said before. If Candace can understand the suffering and feel sympathy for the suffering of all the Palestinian kids that have been killed in Gaza, she should also be able to see that same suffering about the Black kids that were unarmed and were killed by the police in the United States. And this is why I bring back again foreign policy connection to domestic policy. So you pay attention to what's happening abroad, and you always have to remember you can connect it back to what we're lacking here in the United States. Over $890 billion. They're trying to push for the defense budget now. That's money that could be spent right here in the United States, not to build cop cities, because the cops are trained. Don't buy that BS. Not to build cop cities, but to dismantle some of these departments and build something better. So the money has always been there. And this is what I've tried to explain to people multiple times. So you can't be one-sided on this here. So when Candace said at the beginning that she's an ally with Brie, because now there's something that affected her directly that also affected Brie directly, even though they're in different political spectrums, right? Be careful with the word ally, because just because I agree with you or sympathize with you on this one particular issue, I would not consider you an ally because you are still not willing to have respect for the cost of life for Black kids, Black men in particular in the United States, to the hands of the police. So to me, that's not an ally. You're not an ally with me because I got fired and you got fired. That's not an allyship. And I take that very lightly. And there's times when I've gotten this wrong. There are times when I assumed that someone was an ally because we agreed on one issue. And I realized that's not enough for you to be an ally with me. So just because you got fired and I got fired over criticism of Israel, that doesn't make you an ally. Because where are you, if you're an ally, where are you when the police are gunning down unarmed Black boys in the street? You were on the side of the police. You weren't defending Ahmaud Arbery. You weren't defending George Floyd. You weren't defending Tamir Rice, who was just a kid. You were on the side of the oppressor. So that's not an ally. Okay. That is not an ally. I'm telling you right now, with me, that does not make you an ally. And I've become very more careful about the way that I use that word and who I apply that to.
That's where I'm getting at, where I say it actually is what we're talking about is just racial supremacy. You know, I don't know a single person who was not horrified by what happened on October 7th, who obviously wants every hostage to be returned because we value the lives of the innocent, full stop. It doesn't matter to me if that's an innocent Palestinian life or whether it's an innocent Israeli life. And as soon as I was saying this is equal to me, suddenly all of these attacks started. And I really did feel like what was happening after October 7th is very reminiscent to me of what was happening after 9/11 and growing up in the 9/11. And I look back on that time because I realized that there was this sort of media insistence. We didn't have social media. We didn't have other perspectives being given to us. There really was no sense of an independent media. But I look back on that and I realized I was almost brainwashed to believe that Muslim life had no worth. And thinking about how scared I was every time I saw a Muslim at, wherever I was, whether it was an airport, anywhere. And I actually believe that the media in America was successful in dehumanizing Muslims.
Let me pause here for a second. So she's right about that. She has a point here. For those of you that were alive after September 11, you might remember this. Some of you may be too young to remember, but there was a lot of, that's why I said, like after October 7th, I said, here we go again with the dehumanization of Muslim people. After October 7th, there was a lot of it. September 11th, there was a lot of it. And from people that you would not expect it to be from, to be honest. A lot of people, a lot of Americans in this country bought into the fact that this idea that all Muslim people were terrorists. Some of you, again, I think are a little too young to, you might not remember that, but I definitely remember it. There's one person I know of in particular that they changed their last name because they did not want to appear to be as Muslim as they are. They changed their last name so people would not, think that they are Arabic. That's how bad it was for some people. So it's good that Candace came around on that issue.
I'm not a little girl anymore. Okay. I'm an adult. I am a woman. I'm a mother, which is the most important thing. And I just remember after October 7th, I was very due to give birth, looking on Twitter and seeing these children. These children happen to have the same complexion as my daughter because I have a mixed child, being blown up, and then having people tell me that I shouldn't care about that. And I said to myself, okay, I totally understand people wanting to have their hostages returned. I can totally understand people wanting to make sure that their family is safe. But what I cannot understand is how you think you are a good person when you devalue the life of a child. You are a monster. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're an American commentator. I don't care if you're a rich billionaire. I don't care if you're the average person on the street. When you applaud one hostage being returned, and yet thousands of people who are similarly innocent were killed in the process, and you go, oh, well, too bad, you become a monster. And I know that there are so many people who agree with me in media who are scared to say that because they are fearful of having their jobs. They're fearful of losing their jobs, rather. So can you speak to exactly how you found out you were being terminated and on what grounds you were terminated?
Yeah, so let me pause here for just a second to chime on something that Candace said about when she looks at the Palestinian kids, she's reminded of her children because her children have the same complexion. They're the same complexion of her children, she said, right? So, and these are things that you live and you learn, and you learn as you grow, because there will come a time, I'm not sure how old her children are, but there will come a time when she's going to have to deal with the bigotry and the hate in reference to her children, more so as they get older, right? So people are a little bit nicer to the kids. And I know this, I come from a multiracial family. So people are more nicer to the kids when they're little, but as they get older, they're going to have to deal with a multitude of things, right? They have to deal with some people thinking that they're not Black enough because they're biracial. Some people thinking they're not white enough because they're biracial. They'll have to deal with that. I don't know if she has sons, but police will look at her sons the same way they look at a Black boy that is 100% African American. They're going to look at them the same way as they get older. Than the issues with dating and things like that. This is not me to discourage. I'm not here trying to discourage people from interracial dating. I'm in an interracial relationship. I'm not here to discourage people from having children. But what I am here to say is this is just the beginning. The way that Candace is seeing people dehumanize the Palestinian kids, that's just the beginning. As her children get older, she will see this become more blatant and more obvious the older the kids get, particularly when they get past the age of 12, especially for the boys, because this is when, again, people don't see them as a little boy anymore.
The email that I posted to Twitter is the entire record of contact that I've had with the Hill. So I usually worked Monday through Thursdays. We had just shifted through a Monday to Wednesday schedule at my insistence, in part because of how hostile the environment had become, not just on air with my co-host, who I'm, obviously the point of the show is for us to debate and we have a good working relationship off screen, but with the staff behind the scenes, new producers that had been hired who ostensibly were there to exert some broader editorial guidance over the show, but seemed to focus very specifically on minimizing the extent to which we could cover the Israel-Palestine conflict. There were a number of indicators for months now that they were unhappy with the tenor of the show. Obviously, my co-host Robbie was there to push back. I don't know if they found his pushback to be inadequate, but they kept wanting to have specific kinds of guests on the show, which I, of course, was open to. I have never turned down a guest for ideological reasons. I cannot say the same for guests that were aligned with my ideological perspective and my co-host, I have to say. But
this is something I can verify. I can verify part of that. There was one time when I went on to Rising, because those episodes are recorded. So there was one time when I went on there, and I remember Robbie said, before we started recording, Robbie said, "Congratulations, you made the cut." And I was like, what? And I remember apparently it had been made clear that the producers had decided that there were certain people that they didn't want to bring back onto the show. Now, I don't know which producer in particular made that decision. I don't know, but it was said to me that congratulations, you're one of the people that they still want to bring back onto the show. I can also tell you that over the year or so, it has been about a year and a half, over the year and a half and so, since going on Rising, I have noticed that over time, the emails started to come from different people. So in the beginning, there was one producer that was reaching out. Then I noticed the producer would change, and then it would be another name and then a different name. So it seemed like there was a lot of turnover that was happening with the producers. I think Brie can speak more to that than I can, but just based on the email communication, I did notice that it seemed like there was turnover happening among the producers. So that's interesting.
I noticed that when they were trying to find guests that presented a pro-Israel point of view, unlike the kind of guests that I seek to bring on who have some kind of issue area expertise, let's say because they're a journalist, or let's say because they're a professor, or let's say because they're a politician, an elected official, they would bring on people who seem to just be internet actors who would come on, and instead of taking questions from Robbie and I in a professional kind of interview style of format, would very quickly try to personalize the issue and want to have an argument with me about whatever tweet that they had last seen of mine that they didn't like, which obviously puts me in a really tough position as a host who wants to be gracious and sort of moderate and not get into a back and forth with the guest. But the guests started increasingly coming on with this kind of ideology. So there were indicators like that. I got a message from on high that we were not allowed to interview Norm Finkelstein. I know you sat down with him for a really terrific interview that I watched and I thought was really well done. And the argument was that he was a Holocaust denier. Norm Finkelstein, as you're aware, is someone whose parents both survived the Holocaust and knows the horrors of the Holocaust much more intimately and personally than most people alive today. And the final straw was when we got an indication that this most recent guest, the sister of a hostage, wanted to come on. It was pitched to me specifically that she wanted to come on to talk to me, not to be interviewed by both myself and my co-host, but that she wanted to talk to me. And to me, that was a clue that it was going to be another one of these interviews where a guest who has a really legitimate point of view, obviously, as someone who has been living in the limbo of not knowing whether or not someone she loves more than almost anyone else in the world is safe. That is a perspective we absolutely should have on the show. But I was worried that exactly what happened would happen and that she would turn this into a referendum on my own personal political views and try to play sort of both the position of a human being who's going through something really tough, for whom we should all have compassion, but also someone who is advancing a political ideology and advancing very specific untruths on a news show that it's my job as a reporter and journalist to push back on and fact check in real time.
Yeah, and I can't think of anything grosser than utilizing the victimhood, the true victimhood of your sister to advance a political ideology. That shouldn't be the case, And you are absolutely correct that there does seem to be this media environment where they are propagandizing. They're propagandizing because if you truly believe in free speech and you truly believe that the best idea wins, then you should have no problem sitting down and having a meaningful debate, right? So to call Norm Finkelstein a Holocaust denier when his parents survived the Holocaust, it's absurd. It's so absurd they don't want him on the show, right? They don't want him on the show because if of course, once he speaks, you realize it's completely ridiculous to make that sort of an accusation.
That's the thing, too, I was going to say as well in reference to the Norm Finkelstein issue. To me, it's like, what were they afraid that Norm Finkelstein was going to say? Like, obviously, his parents, are survivors of the Holocaust. So my thing is, like, if you encourage dynamic debate and discussion, what were they afraid that he was going to say onto Rising that was going to be problematic? Norm Finkelstein has been onto multiple platforms, very large ones. He's also been onto smaller ones. I think the first time he came on this show, I don't even think I had to look it up. I don't even think I had 50,000 subscribers the first time he came onto this show. So that's the thing that was really weird to me, the fact that they weren't willing to give him a voice, someone whose parents were survivors of the Holocaust. It was very strange.
But we're seeing that happen on so many networks that purport to be about free speech. And I am somebody who has moved so much in my political ideology from, where I was on the left, and then realizing that I know that we disagree here, that I had it completely wrong, which should show people that I am willing to move, right? If you actually present an idea to me and I find your idea to be valid, I am happy to jump on your side.
So this part right here, I think apparently bothered some people in the comments. I read some of the comments. I didn't read all of them. Some people were cheering this on. They were happy that this discussion took place. But I will say that some of the Candace stands in the chat were not happy that Candace made that comment that she was willing to move. Some people were saying in the comments, don't fall for this. Don't agree with her. Don't move over to her side. You shouldn't have brought her on because she's a commie and like all this kind of stuff. It was also kind of weird. Some people put comments in the chat where they said that like, Brie got fired because she was unprofessional. Your firing is different. And I'm like, they literally both were fired because they were criticizing Israel. So there were some people that just made this a political partisan, ploy. Like they just wanted to be against this conversation happening because Brie was on the left, like the real left, not Democrat left, but like the real left. And so they were mad that Candace even entertained this conversation. It was just weird. Look at the comments when you get a chance.
And yet you see on this one issue, the loudest, most platformed pro-Israel voices don't want to debate. They don't want to debate. I've reached out. I've tried to have people on for a debate. They don't want to debate. And the only people that don't want to debate their ideas while they're sitting and they're talking down to you and they're telling you that they're right and you're wrong and you're an anti-Semite are the people that are lying. That's my view. You're a liar, okay? Because I'm Candace. I don't have all of the degrees that the rest of these people have who think that they're so smart and they're so brilliant. Wouldn't you just think that you would slam me in a debate? I'm so dumb and you're so smart and you're so wise and you just need to teach us things. If the Israel argument is valid, sit down and debate it with somebody who is against the Israel argument. That's it. And let people watch it and let people observe it and let people move their opinion one way or the other. But I do want to ask you.
So would Candace be willing to have a debate or a conversation with reparations activists? I'm really curious about that. Be Easy brought up a really good point. He said Candace Owens won't sit down with any from the new Black media, but she sits down with people who she thinks can win in a debate that won't challenge her, goes on monologues that aren't fact checked. This is a good point. Like, would she be willing to sit down with Phil Scott, like a debate with him? Or would she be willing to sit down with Professor Black Truth and have a debate with him? I mean, this is a good point to bring up.
Brianna, because we don't have much time here. A lot of stuff is also happening in Congress. I don't know if you caught Thomas Massie. He's my favorite congressman ever. I am a Thomas Massie stan. He sat down with Tucker Carlson and he said, essentially, every Republican in Congress except for him has an AIPAC handler. An AIPAC handler. We have seen the strength of AIPAC. We have seen the strength of the ADL. We talked about in monologue, which you didn't get to see, how Trump couldn't get this thing done. He wanted to ban TikTok, because he had concerns about China. Suddenly, John Greenblatt swoops in and it's gone. TikTok has got to go, or at least it passes in the House. And immediately you start to realize who's actually controlling Congress.
Yeah, and it's not just Republicans. I followed the Massie AIPAC challenge very closely because it mirrors, frankly, the kind of challenges we've been seeing on the left for quite some time.
And I think we always need to remember this, guys, because Cynthia McKinney tried to tell people about this years ago. Years ago, when Cynthia McKinney was in Congress, she tried to warn people. She tried to tell people the hold that AIPAC had over Congress. That's why Cynthia McKinney, did not win her seat. She wasn't reelected because AIPAC put up so much money against her to get her out of there because she didn't want to. She said something about there was this pledge that she had to make to Israel. And she's like, why do I need to make a pledge to the state of Israel when I live here in the United States? She did try to warn people about this a long time ago. And I wonder, what would have happened if people would have listened and actually heard Cynthia McKinney back then? Because look at where we are now. A lot of people are giving credit to Thomas Massie. That's cool because he had the interview with Tucker Carlson and he pointed this out. But Cynthia McKinney said this a long time ago.
The left, not liberals, who I am frequently a critic of, I think I critique more than any other group, is not what I'm talking about here. I'm talking about real progressives, to the left of Bernie, frankly, have frequently found themselves in the exact same situation as Thomas Massey, because it is, again, the one and true only red line on a bipartisan basis that nobody on either side of the aisle is allowed to cross. So you've seen these mounting AIPAC challenges from candidates like Anita Turner in Ohio's 11th district. Summer Lee was able to survive her challenge. You're seeing Jamal Bowman in New York getting challenged along these lines. And you're seeing a lot of, and I know that you have an interest in kind of the craven weaponization of identity politics and the exploitation of race to lend cover to what are, frankly, in this case, kind of a foreign policy agenda, but are often sort of corporate policy agendas. And there's often overlap between the two. As we're talking about Israel, we can't not talk about defense contracting and Boeing and why there is so much incentive to continue this war along with so many others. But what you see is that particularly people like Richie Torres, Congress members who are Black and brown, are often weaponized to advance the interests of Israel in this case. Hakeem Jeffries, also from New York, frequently famously says Israel is the sixth borough. Mayor Adams, unsurprisingly, is a big advocate for Israel. And I think they try to disguise the extent to which there is a conflict of interest there between the average working class American and the interests that are being pushed by a foreign lobby by dressing it up in the veneer of a trusted Black representative. On the other hand, and I think we talked about this a little bit before we started recording, those Black representatives and leaders, political leaders that don't fall in line are subject to particular scrutiny and particularly forceful pushback. And I think that's part of what you experience, is part of what I experienced. The Stop Anti-Semitism account recently decided to post a picture of a random Black high school student who had said that they want to free Palestine, really targeting in particular Black people, because I think they're capitalizing on this stereotype that because there is, I think, a longstanding tradition of Black people kind of empathizing with the situation of Palestinians, because frankly, it is familiar, that we have historically also been tarred with the label anti-Semite, and it's a method to effectively shut down conversations about this issue.
So I just want to add, in reference to the statement she made there about the student that was targeted, there is an entire website, you guys, where it is Zionist targeting Black college students. I kid you not. The ones that participated in the protest. There's an entire website. There's also another website that I saw of Zionists targeting professors and students together that participated in the protest. It's really bad, really bad. And I don't care. Like, you don't get that type of information together that fast unless you have the resources to do so.
That's exactly right. And I do actually totally agree with you that there does seem this particular targeting of Black American voices. And I can't figure that out. I don't know why it is, but this part right here. When Candace says there's a targeting of Black American voices and I can't figure that out, and I can't figure out why that is. Well, maybe, Candace, if you would have listened to some of the Black Americans that were trying to tell you about the systemic issues in this country, maybe you would know why that is. You see what I said before about not having that empathy for a particular issue until it affects you directly. So what Candace just said there is like a targeting of Black voices. According to the Daily Wire and a lot of their peeps, that would have been considered identity politics. Don't talk about that. That's identity politics. Leave race out of it. Let's not bring race into this. No, that's identity politics. And it was fine and dandy for Candace and the Daily Wire peeps to say that, because they were not directly affected at that point in time. Now Candace has been singled out. She has been directly affected.
And she sees that all of a sudden it was totally fine to promote Israel. It was totally fine for Ben Shapiro and the rest of the dudes over there at the Daily Wire. It was totally fine for them to say you have to be pro-Israel first. That's identity politics. Everyone pay attention to what's happening. So it was never about don't talk about identity politics. It was about they wanted you to talk about certain identities. Because Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire are totally fine with you promoting Zionism, promoting Israel first. That is an identity. Sorry, but it's a fact. They just didn't want you promoting your identity. Can we say it louder for the people in the back? Candace Owens and the dudes over at the Daily Wire did not want you promoting the Black identity. That's what that was about. You're totally fine to promote Israeli identity. And where would we be had this not happened to Candace? Had she not been fired from the Daily Wire, she would still be at the Daily Wire. She would still be there. Would this conversation have taken place with Candace and Brie if she wasn't fired from the Daily Wire? Would Candace Owens have brought Brianna Joy Gray onto her show at the Daily Wire if Brie still got fired, but Candace didn't? The Daily Wire probably wouldn't want it because she got fired for criticizing Israel. Where was this conversation with Candace Owens and Brianna Joy Gray before Brie got fired? All this time, they've been two of the most vocal, I think, on the right and on the left in independent media, two most vocal Black women. Why didn't Candace Owens reach out for a conversation with Brianna Joy Gray before Brie got fired? Because now there's an issue that affects both of them directly. So now we can have a conversation. This is why I tried to warn people about the overuse of the phrase identity politics, because eventually your identity will be attacked too. And now Candace has to deal with that. Yes, there have been Black voices that were targeted. And if Candace would have been listening to some of us on the left when we were talking about these things years ago, Candace would have been able to see, yes, oh my God, there are Black voices that are being targeted. Yes, we've been saying this. But you didn't want to talk about it or deal with it until it happened to you.
You're labeled anti-Semite from Michael Jackson, me, and I'm going, what are you talking about? There's literally no record of this. I've worked for Jewish companies my entire life. How did I just become a raging anti-Semite? Simply because I have questions about what is happening to these innocent Palestinian children and why we are treating them like their lives don't matter. Again, my position is that what we're seeing operating in the media are racial supremacists. And I think that they're taking the wrong side here. I feel it. You can sense it in the air. People are starting to ask questions. People are seeing what is happening to people. There seems to be an awakening on this issue. And let me tell you, if this awakening speeds up, and I think it is, it's catalyzing, people are going to look back and they're going to remember these voices that sat there and supported racial supremacy because they didn't want to lose their jobs, that supported racial supremacy, supported the death of innocent children, who are out there saying outrageous things, applauding the death of children as long as they get back one person, as opposed to saying, no, this conflict needs to come to an end because too many children are dying. I have no regrets in what I've said. I have no regrets in the way that I've been treated in the media, because at the end of the day, my relationship doesn't matter with the boss. It matters with God. And
let me just say this really quick. So first of all, I'm glad again that you have the sympathy for the Palestinian children, as I do too. But my question is, why don't you have that sympathy for Black children? Right? Why is it when something happens with the Black kids, it's always you take the side of the other party? Right? Because that worked for the Daily Wire. They were totally fine with Candace doing that. What do you think she was hired for? What do you think she was hired to do? So they were totally fine with her doing that. But there's no way. If you can sit up there and see the way that Palestinian kids are being treated, you can have the sympathy for them. You should have sympathy for all kids then. That includes the little Black boys that are targeted by the police. and you took the side of the police. And first of all, again, when we talk about allies, nobody, I'll tell you again, nobody who is pro the po-po and is always out there defending the police is an ally with me. Period. Because I don't fuck with the po-po.
All going to have to account to God one day. And you can see these psychopaths in media, you know, that are trying to sell you something different and tell you that there's something wrong with you or you're perverted because you feel bad for a dead child that you are seeing on your screen. Yeah, I wouldn't want to be those people when you have to meet the ultimate boss one day and really account for what you've created and, you know, throughout your life.
Yeah, Candace, I would love to just speak to that Jewish supremacy point, if I could, to clarify for some people who might hear that phraseology and find it to be a little bit dissonant. I just want to say that obviously I think we can all understand that any supremacy movement is a problem. Mm-hmm. We are, I think, so rightly appalled by the horrors of the Holocaust, and we have been so that has been emphasized and taught to us so strongly in our education as we grow up, rightly so, that I think the idea of even thinking about Jewish supremacy is sometimes difficult to wrap your brain around because we're so focused on the opposite, right? Anti-Semitism and the relatively recent historical tragedy that ended up killing 2/3 of the world's Jewish population in a horrible Holocaust, right? And I want to just really address that dissonance because what I'm talking about, and I think what you were talking about when we're talking about supremacy, is an ideology that I think is required to support Zionism, but which is not fundamental to Judaism as a whole.
Correct.
And there has
Judaism
been this effort,
is not Zionism.
Right. There's been this effort to conflate the two because we all abhor the notion of being anti-Semitic, right? And I think there is a sensitivity to that Zionists are aware of, and so they know that it's easier to, marginalize someone for being anti-Semitic than anti-Zionist. Because what is Zionism? Zionism is a particular political belief that thinks that there should be a Jewish state established in a part of the world that is overwhelmingly Arab. And when you do that, it requires you to establish a demographic majority to not allow Palestinians to, for instance, have the right of return. That a Jewish person who was born in New York or Philadelphia or Iowa is able to have the right, even if they've never stepped foot in that region, to move there, whereas a Palestinian who has keys to the house that they owned before they were expelled in the Nakba in 1948 is not allowed to visit the country. Where Palestinians who work in Israel via work permits are forced to wait for hours at checkpoints, or who need to get better hospital care than is available to them in the occupied territories, have to wait even if their health is imperiled because there's different roads and different rules for Palestinians, for Arabs in Israel. This is an apartheid state. It's a two-tiered state that specifically gives different rights, superior rights to people who are Jewish as opposed to people who are Muslim and Arab. And I say Arab and Muslim separately because there are Christian Arabs in Gaza who have their churches being bombed, who are themselves being killed. Justin Amash, the Libertarian former Congress member, had multiple family members killed by U.S.-backed airstrikes earlier in this conflict, and you almost heard nothing about it. No condemnations from Congress for a former sitting U.S. Congress member, Palestinian American Congress members' own young family members being massacred by Israeli bombs with American political cover. That's what we're talking about here. And all of the problems of the region can be traced back to the insistence that Palestinians and Jewish Israelis cannot have the same rights within the state of Israel, because if that happened, there would be demographic parity, the same number of Palestinians as Israelis. And that would, we're told, necessarily imperil the safety of Jewish Israelis. Now, let me ask you this, Candace. Does it make sense to you to simultaneously be making an argument that Israel is a democratic country that we should be loving and supporting because, look, 20% of the population is Arab and we all live peacefully, and isn't that wonderful? But also to be making the argument that we can't have any more Palestinians because they're inherently violent, they're inherently regressive, they will ruin our society if they come into the country.
Well, that's what I'm speaking to when I talk.
And let me just say something here too. It is very much insulting to the Palestinian people, the fact that a Jewish person that is American born and grew up in the United States can just basically take over the keys to their house, that they can move to the West Bank and take over the keys to their house. It is one of the most violent forms of gentrification where they come in, and I've seen videos of them bulldozing their house, being squatters, sitting outside their house and just waiting for them to leave to go to work so then they can occupy it. One of the more violent forms of gentrification. But to that point, we have gentrification here in the United States as well. It's not as violent, but it is still happening, and it happens predominantly in low income, poor, Black neighborhoods. So this is why I always say make the connection from foreign policy to domestic policy. Now, we give Israel $3.8 billion a year. Why aren't we using that money here in the United States to help fix up those communities and let the people stay where they are so that those buildings are not bought out by developers that raise the rent to enormous prices and kick Black people out of those communities? Does everybody understand what I'm saying here? This is gentrification on two different levels. The gentrification that is happening in the West Bank is a violent form of gentrification, but we have gentrification happening here in the United States in poor and low income Black neighborhoods where Black people are being pushed out in a different way because the developers come in and they buy up the buildings and they increase the rent, making the property value expensive for everyone else in that neighborhood and on that block. And so the landlords have no choice but to increase the rent of the people who grew up in that neighborhood. So the point is, again, to this, because if you can understand that, if you can see that this is what is taking place in the West Bank, and you said this isn't right, what's happening to the Palestinian people, but I see that you're silent about that gentrification happening here to Black people in the United States. Again, it's not a violent form, but it happens. Why are you silent? Why are you silent when it happens to us? And part of this could be an audience thing. Because again, like sometimes like you have garnered a certain audience. I went through audience shift. I went through this. Candace has garnered a certain audience. So there's only so much that she's going to be willing to say so that she doesn't lose a significant portion of that base, right? Like Candace ain't gonna flip tomorrow and say, okay, I'm progressive. Okay, let's just be real. So there are going to be things that are said that is going to upset a particular segment of that audience. Not all of them, but a particular segment of it. You have to make the connection between foreign policy and domestic issues here in the United States. And I think part of what I was hoping to get from this discussion, I was hoping to hear that connection. And I feel like the only time I hear that connection is when Candace brings up the fact that her dad was a sharecropper. Hold on, that might be coming up here. Hold on.
About this dehumanization of Palestinians that's happening right now in the media. It's disgusting. And like I said, I would say I'm agnostic on the issue. I want to learn more, which is why I'm trying to have a debate with somebody who is, radically pro-Zionist. I don't have an issue with the fact that you're radically pro-Zionist. What I have an issue with is that you speak down to people as if you are a superior and you won't debate your ideas, right? I have an issue with the fact that you're speaking about, the Arab population, who, by the way, are Semitic. You're talking about anti-Semitism and these are Semitic people. You're speaking about them in this way that makes me uncomfortable. My grandfather grew up in a segregated South. I'm not comfortable with the way you're speaking about them. And when you try to shut down my conversation and you speak to me in that same way, you are acting like a racial supremacist.
Now, she brings up that her grandfather was a sharecropper in the segregated South. That's the case for a lot of us, or most of us that are descendants of slavery, right? So here's the problem. And this is where I wish Brie would have pushed back right here. Now, all of a sudden, it's okay to talk about this. Now, all of a sudden, it's okay for Candace to talk about the fact that her grandfather or great-grandfather or grandfather was a sharecropper in the segregated South. But just a couple years ago, her camp was like, that's identity politics. Yeah, this is identity politics, right? So why is it okay to talk about? Now it's okay. Now it's okay to talk about the racism. Now it's okay for Candace to talk about that. So my whole thing is here where I wish like Brie would have pushed back right at this particular moment is that what you just said, Candace, is what Black people have been saying for years. We've been saying for years that we are spoken down to in a certain way by white people. We've been saying for years that we have systemic racism in this country, which you said racism isn't really even a thing anymore. We've been saying these things. So it took October 7th to happen for Candace to see, whoa, there's supremacy out there and they're really talking down to these Palestinian people a certain way and they're, demonizing them. But we've been saying that. Black people have been saying this. And when we said it, Candace Owens said, no, we don't need to focus on those things. She said, I want Black people to be better and do better. All of the other things that were happening, it was just all in our head, or we were poisoned by liberals. I'm not even a liberal. So this is a problem. This is a problem. And I was hoping Brie would push back here. Black Lives Matter, which she criticized, like I said, the organization itself, there's lots of criticism to be made about the organization, but the grassroots efforts on the ground where the people were the hardcore activists, some of those people gave their lives to that cause. Some of the people that you never hear about anymore that were protesting, whether it was Ferguson, etc., some of those people are gone. Some of those people disappeared and were never heard from again. So when she criticizes BLM, particularly in the way that she does, again, we got to bring it back to the grassroots. And some of those protesters were trying to tell you the same thing, Candace. We were trying to tell you the way that the police officers were dehumanizing Black men, but you didn't want to hear it because that didn't benefit your audience, that didn't benefit your wallet, and that didn't benefit the Daily Wire. Let's keep it real. This is important. Now, all of a sudden, no. And when I say push back, people say, well, no, she should have been. No, you won't have to yell at someone to push back at them. But I wish Brie would have pushed back on that point right there. Because notice who brought it up. Candace did. Brie didn't bring up those issues. Candace brought up the dehumanization. Candace brought up the racial issue multiple times. She brought up the racial issue with her children, and she brought up the racial issue with her great-grandfather. So I wish Brie would have pushed back on those two particular points. And the only thing I can think of is, like, again, it seemed like they did have like a time crunch here, as they said a little bit earlier in the interview. But you can push back and still be civil. Brie has been known to do this. I have pushed back on people and still been very civil. But my thing is it's hard for me to sit back here and believe that now all of a sudden it's like, if you can have that type of sympathy for the Palestinian people, you should be able to have that same type of sympathy for your own people, Candace. And since we're on that subject, has Candace Owens said anything about the Tulsa massacre survivors that were denied reparations? These people are survivors. She say anything about that? Anything about that? No? How many commentators talked about that story? I get it. It's not trending. It's not popular. So I think we need to start asking this question. Because if you really care about that stuff, why don't you talk about that? That is one of the most significant things that I think the Black community should be talking about right now. You have living survivors of the Tulsa massacre, and the court decided not to give them reparations. Any Black person in media who is ignoring this story, I'm looking at you with a side eye. I'm looking at you with a side eye because I feel like either you don't want to talk about it because you don't want to piss off some of your audience members, or you just don't want to talk about it because you just don't give a shit. We'll finish up with this part here.
And we have to have the courage to call that out. And of course, it's not all Jewish people. Some people genuinely just are like, I want the hostages to be returned. You know, I am concerned. You know, I followed some Jewish influencers who have been so understanding. You know, there are people that you listen to them and you're like, this makes sense. They're not being pushy. They're not being supremacist. They are obviously concerned. They grew up in Israel. You know, their family grew up in Israel as Jews, you know, because this was after 1945 or, you know, within the last 30 years. And they are not disgusting in the way that they are talking about this issue. But it feels like a lot of people in the media are. And that's what makes me uncomfortable. They are very disgusting and matter of fact. And, oh, well, we've got bigger bombs and who cares how many Muslims you kill? I care because I'm a Christian and I'm not comfortable with the amount of death that is happening to children. How dare I call myself a pro-life conservative and then stay mum on this issue? How dare I call myself a Christian, a child of God, and then be mum on this issue because I care about money? And so that's kind of where I want people to really consider listening to this podcast. Are you comfortable with the amount of death of innocent children? And to check yourself, have you?
Yeah, this is a good question. Well, she don't like that. Colin said Juneteenth is on Wednesday. Let's see if Candace talks about the holiday in a less disparaging way. That's a good point. That's a good point. I wanted to get to this part here where it sounds like Brie did invite her. Let me see. Yeah, I think she invited her here. And then we'll come out and then
Right at Patreon, you can get an additional Monday episode for $5 a month. This Monday, today, as we're recording, I just released a really thorough deep dive into the months-long effort to oust me at the Hill and actually, frankly, get into some issues around transgender issues and politics as well in that episode. And I want to extend the invitation, Candace, to you also. I know that we disagree about a lot of things, but I have been impressed by your willingness to have open debate and conversation and be receptive to different points of view. I've seen it in the context of Israel, and I would love to continue this conversation on a number of other issues if you ever have the time. I know you're a very busy woman.
Absolutely. We should debate BLM. I mean, everything. This is the beauty. Let's debate it. Somebody's right, somebody's wrong, and let the public, trust the public to decide. Don't propagandize them. Allow them to listen to both of the debates and to decide what they agree with.
So let's see if that happens. You know, maybe it sounds like the BLM discussion, and hopefully not just BLM, but some of the other things that have been said, right? But hopefully that discussion will happen. It sounds like, you know, Brie did invite her to have that discussion on bad faith. So that should be pretty cool if that conversation takes place. And I hope Brie takes her to task. But I will say on those two particular points where I did pause and told you, I think I paused. Yeah. The two particular spots where I paused and I said, I wish Brie would have pushed back more here. Yeah, I wish that would have happened. Because like I said before, if you're going to go onto Candace's show, and I sent out this morning, if you're going to go onto her show, I would not have been as nice to Candace. I would not have been as nice. I wouldn't have been yelling, but I wouldn't have been as nice to Candace because it can give some people the impression that, okay, what's happening here? You know? That is not to say you can't have conversations with people you disagree with. You absolutely can. I've had conversations with people I disagree with on this show. And some of those conversations have been heated discussions, have been very heated discussions. But I will say, I think that there needs to be more pushback on Candace. Like, I'm sorry. It sucks that like what they did to her was wrong. The firing was wrong. I don't agree with any of that. I don't agree with the censorship. I don't agree with that happening with Brie either. But Candace Owens needs to be pushed back on more. And I have no problem telling Candace that myself, which is why she won't be on this show. So keep that in mind. Keep that in mind. Pay attention to who goes where, when, how, and why. Because I'll be the first to tell you, if it were me, like if she had reached out, I would have never hid that from you guys. And if she had reached out, she probably would have been on here, but it would have not been a nice conversation. Just keeping it real. Truth Bearer says Candace Owens knows you would hold her accountable. Exactly. Exactly. No. Sabby is not feeling any of that. But I'm glad the conversation took place. Some people said this broke the internet, that kind of thing. But I think in the future, you definitely should be pushing back more on Candace. Be Easy said, more people at bars, more jersey sales, more ad dollars. In reference to the Celtics, I think. 11 Drug Beanie says, it was very strange when she said her kids are going to look like Palestinians. That's why she cares. So that means she don't care about dark skin. That was a good point too. Again, I don't know, man. Couldn't have been me. Thank you, Miss Winnie. Candace hated Trump in 2016. Read her 180 blog where she wrote nasty things about Donald Trump. Everyone knows Ben is Israel first. She wanted out of her contract. And thank you for saying that, Miss Winnie. Yes, I thought so because I knew Ben was Israel first. New York 4. So this is the same Candace that was saying there is no racism and blaming Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd for their own deaths. Oh no, man. Thank you, Louise, for the super chat. Your story on Real Page prompted me to dig in. My property management company is part of the FBI investigation and why my lease is insane. I'm organizing a class action lawsuit with fellow tenants and have reached out to the Attorney General of the VA. Well, kudos to you, Louise, and I'm sorry that happened, but that story was wild. Abel says, I'm biracial / black, and Sabby is speaking nothing but facts. Hey, I know, man, because like I said, I have a multiracial family, so I know. Thank you. Miss Winnie says Candace is using this Gaza issue to advance her career. There could be some of that too. Notori, good point, Sab. Candace's children are cute now, but when she is going to be forced to see it is when her children hit 12. Exactly. That's when people will start to treat, that's when you'll see the real racists come out. Thank you, Green Coalition. There's a lot of little emojis there. Says, love you. Thank you. Love you. Thank you, Jacoby. So Professor Black Truth, Jason Black, Tariq Nasheed, Kid Gravity, Beyond Tyrann Reigns, Phil Scott. They're not going to want to talk to her after things that she said about Black people over the years. She's a grifter. There you go. JB says, question, would Candace care as much about Palestinians if they were Black? Black Palestinians do exist. Yeah, they do. Thank you, Colin. My father recently told me you have to take care of your own community first. Candace has only cared about herself. She doesn't care about the Black community and the struggles we deal with. Here you go. Thank you for becoming a member, Corey Brown. Thank you so much for becoming a member. Whoop, whoop, Corey Brown. Meet me at the altar in your white dress. See, now that song's stuck in my head. Thank you for the super chat, Sunny. The enemy of the enemy is my friend. Salute to Russia and Putin on Black Jesus. Thank you for that. Meet me at the altar. Nund, Sabby, you earlier mentioned Professor Black Truth. Can you bring him on one day? He speaks a lot of truth, and it can be a bit difficult for non-Black Americans to understand, but it's applicable to all. I would love to, if somebody can find me, hold on. If someone can send me contact information, I can tell you majority of the time, if you haven't seen someone on the show, it's because I don't have contact information for them. I couldn't find any online, right? So that's usually why you haven't seen them. Or the other thing after that is I have contacted them, but they just haven't responded. Most people don't say flat out no, like usually they don't respond, or they do respond and say, this is my favorite. They do respond and say, yeah, let's do it. And then you ask them, what days work for them, what times or whatever, that you're flexible, and then you don't hear anything back. So that's also a way of saying no without actually saying the words no. It's really funny. I'd rather people just say no. I've told people no before. I've told people no before, but I've told them why I said no. I wasn't just like, no. Funny times. Yeah, you guys are so funny. Oh, Rock, can we get Rockfin comments, Eric? Thanks. Thank you so much for the tip, Roger. People, I must push back on y'all saying, let's get Sab, Brie, and Candy together for a discussion. There must be good faith if you're going to have a discussion with a conservative, intelligent Black woman. Just because Candace is elevated, don't make her honest in her beliefs. If you want to see Sab have a discussion with an intelligent conservative sister who is honest, that won't throw Black people under the bus, have Sonny Johnson. Interesting. And thank you for this. Just please stop pushing Candy as if she is the only Black conservative woman out there. If you talk to Black conservatives, most of them will tell you Candace is grifting and they don't appreciate her using their belief system to grift. They will tell you not only is she grifting, but how she is grifting. They'll give you inside baseball. Interesting. And thank you for this. Candy scared of Muslims. Okay, if you're from our community and grew up in our community, you would realize you're surrounded by Muslims, not Arab Muslims, but Black people who are 5% and a member of the Nation of Islam, especially in New York. You know how many times I've heard brothers saying, Assalamu alaikum. Growing up, nobody in the community was scared of Muslims after September 11. Interesting. And thank you for this. Sonny prefers in-depth discussions over interview formats. Y'all would hit it out the park. Also ask her about Candace. Interesting. Thank you so much for that. And I think thank you for the super sticker. New beginning. Thank you. Thank you so much. Yes, I did. Someone asked, I missed this. Sabby has spoken with Darity before. Yes, Dr. Darity and his wife were on here, actually. Yeah. There's been a number of people I've had on the show talk about reparations. In fact, Thursday, again, don't forget, guys, this Thursday, 5 p.m. Eastern time, me and JB have actually a reparations panel over at Revolutionary Blackout Network. So that will be a really interesting discussion. Yeah. What's this, Miss Sugar Snap? I agree, Sabby. Push back on Candace. When you do push back on her, she starts talking fast and doesn't let you get a word in. Yeah, I just think... I don't know, man. I think some people are just doing the most. I think some people are just doing the most. And I just don't understand why anyone, like I would never call Candace Owens an ally. And I don't understand why anyone particularly in the Black community, but also in the left Black community would trust Candace. I would not trust her. And I would tell her that I don't trust you. All right, guys, I am out of here. I went way over my time. Hope you guys have a great Sunday evening, and I hope you have a great Monday. I'll see you Tuesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. Judge Joe Brown will be back here. Don't miss it. Talk to you guys then. Have a good night. Meet me at the altar in your white dress. Keep up the fight.